In a far-off swamp forest, a sudden burst of light washed over the trees, briefly turning the dark woods bright. As the glow faded, it settled on a fallen log where a tiny blob slowly stirred. The small slime, sporting a single eyeball, wiggled in place and looked around nervously, trying to figure out where it was. From what he could piece together, the last thing he remembered was lying in bed the night before, scrolling through his phone and reading manga. He must have fallen asleep without noticing, because the next thing he knew, he had somehow died and ended up in another world. Strangely, that didn't bother him much. He'd read enough stories like this that the situation felt oddly familiar, almost expected. What mattered now was checking his surroundings and figuring out how to stay alive. He tried calling out, hoping someone else might be nearby, but when countless red eyes flickered to life deeper in the forest, he quickly decided silence was the smarter option. Bugs crawled everywhere, and thick miasma hung in the air, yet for some reason, the place felt oddly comfortable to him. Snapping himself out of that thought, he realized this wasn't the time to relax. He needed to understand exactly what he had reincarnated into. That's when a notification window appeared in front of him, announcing that he was a level 1 slime mold. The system even labeled him as a weak creature. The realization hit hard. Of all things, he had become a slime mold. To make matters worse, his health was actively dropping, and if he didn't eat something fast, he'd die again. He scanned the area, wondering what counted as food for something like him. Then he remembered seeing a decomposer trait listed in the system window. That rang a bell. Slime molds were decomposers, which meant they could eat wood. Figuring that was his best bet, he spread his body across the log beneath him. The moment he focused on the command, his body automatically wrapped around the wood and began breaking it down. The sensation surprised him. The taste wasn't bad, kind of like a soggy biscuit. 15 minutes later, a large chunk of the log was gone. He let out a satisfied burp as he leveled up, his HP snapping back to full. The system informed him that he'd gained 1 skill enhancement point. Checking his status window, he recognized the decompose skill, but another one, pulsation, caught his eye. Unsure what it did, he decided to put the point into it just to find out. As the skill leveled up, his body spread outward in thin, web-like strands, each one pulsing like a blood vessel. He quickly understood that pulsation allowed the protoplasm inside him to flow back and forth, letting him move and shift position. The knowledge came to him instantly, magically transferred, even though he technically didn't have a brain anymore. Since eating more wood wouldn't give him additional experience, he decided to explore the ground. He was amazed by how freely he could reshape his body. Sliding down from the log, he spotted a mushroom nearby. Part of him remembered how humans usually ended up dead after eating random fungi, but his instincts as a slime mold told him this was food. Good food. He found the shortest route and scooted toward it. Once he reached the mushroom, he spread himself over it, climbing upward with thin tendrils. Reaching the top, he happily announced to himself that it was time to eat. In his mind, he imagined himself dressed in a fancy suit, calling out to the innocent little mushroom like they were meeting after a long online relationship. The mushroom questioned whether it really was him, and he reassured it, trying to appear charming. Then the mushroom turned around, revealing its true nature, practically inviting him to eat her. That's when it hit him, she was toxic. He'd been scammed. The system immediately warned him that he'd been poisoned, and his health started dropping fast. Panic set in. Acting on instinct, he tore off part of his body and flung himself away from the mushroom. The decomposition failed, giving him no experience, and the lost body mass reduced his maximum HP. Still, the poison effect cleared, and that alone saved him. Shaken but alive, he noticed that he'd managed to partially decompose the mushroom anyway. Frustrated that he couldn't finish it, he left while promising himself he'd come back once he was stronger. He climbed back up the log and settled into the hollow he'd made earlier, eating more wood. After another 15 minutes, his health fully recovered. Once restored, he headed out again, moving across the ground using pulsation. That's when an idea clicked. If he could decompose just a little of the mushroom each time, retreat to heal by eating wood, and repeat the process, he could eventually take it down completely. He named this plan Move Mountain, and returned to the mushroom. When he showed up again, the toxic mushroom complained that this was already the 8th time, asking if he seriously planned on never giving up. This time, instead of retreating, he suddenly restrained her, declaring she was under arrest. The mushroom was stunned as he finally managed to cover her entirely. The decomposition succeeded. He gained experience and unlocked poison resistance. Looking at the new skill, he realized why eating the mushroom had felt more tolerable toward the end. Still, he was annoyed that he hadn't leveled up. He thought the mushroom should have given way more experience. That irritation didn't last long. The damp environment was packed with mushrooms, and he eyed his next targets hungrily. He went on to consume many different kinds, leveling up as he gained more experience. Some were safe, like straw mushrooms, while others, like monk's cap, were extremely toxic but granted stronger poison resistance. He happily broke them all down, turning everything into nutrient. Eventually, he hit a point where mushrooms no longer gave him experience. Deciding not to waste them, he carried the extras back with him. The mushrooms clinging to his body worked as both food and protection. He remembered animal shows from his childhood, where crabs used sea anemones to scare off octopuses. Using poisonous mushrooms the same way, he figured he could deter predators that wanted to eat him. He felt pretty proud of himself for solving his safety problem so cleverly. Just as he was enjoying that thought, a strong wind whipped through the area. Looking up, he noticed something alarming: a group of wasps flying past, carrying chunks of what looked like raw meat. Staring at the giant hornets, Slimy wondered if the poisonous mushrooms stuck to his body might be enough to scare them off. He silently hoped they wouldn't notice him at all. Before anything else could happen, a long tongue suddenly shot out from the shadows, snatching one of the hornets out of the air. A green frog appeared and swallowed the massive insect in a single gulp. Slimy froze in horror. One predator was bad enough, but now another had joined the scene. The remaining hornets immediately swarmed the frog, attacking in a frenzy. From the sidelines, Slimy watched as they stabbed and bit at it. Individually, the hornets were clearly weaker than the frog, but their numbers made up for it. As the fight dragged on, Slimy couldn't help wondering whether they'd seriously injure each other. If they did, maybe he could sneak in and collect the leftovers. Logically speaking, decomposing monster corpses should give far more experience than wood or mushrooms ever could. Just as that thought crossed his mind, the frog suddenly opened its mouth wide. Activating some kind of empowered tongue skill, it lashed out and caught all the remaining hornets at once, swallowing them whole. Slimy was stunned. Then everything got worse. A massive shadow loomed overhead. Before Slimy could react, a giant snake lunged down at the frog, its jaws wide open. Blood sprayed across the swamp as the frog was devoured. Only then did Slimy realize the horrifying truth. The snake was actually the tail of an enormous bird standing in the swamp. The creature straightened up, its giant eye locking onto Slimy, who had been staring in shock. Accepting his fate, Slimy hurriedly offered up his mushrooms, silently begging the bird to spare him. He had already given up on fighting back after such a disastrous chain of events. The bird glanced at the mushrooms, then lifted its head and flapped its wings. A violent gust tore through the area, nearly blowing Slimy away and stripping 30 HP from him in an instant. Then the bird flew off. Night once again swallowed the swamp forest. Slimy, having tucked away what mushrooms he had left, sat trembling on the dead tree log. It finally sank in. He was at the absolute bottom of the food chain. Still, there was a strange bit of luck in that. The gap between him and those top predators was so large that he wasn't even worth eating. Checking his system window again, he bitterly noted that even leveling up 4 times in a single night hadn't changed the label, calling him a weak creature. He wondered how a slime mold like him was supposed to survive, let alone rise above this. Exhausted, he hoped it was all just a dream and that he'd wake up wrapped in his blanket. But morning came. Sunlight poured into the swamp forest. A green slime suddenly dripped down from a mushroom above, splashing onto Slimy like acid. The moment it touched him, his HP dropped sharply. He jolted in pain as the system announced he had gained a new skill called Burst. The skill allowed him to force the ectoplasm in his body to flow in a single direction, creating thrust. Confused and still hurting, Slimy fell to the ground and looked around, trying to understand what had just happened. That's when he noticed a snail slowly crawling toward his mushrooms. The snail activated a skill called Acid Liquor, melting the mushrooms into a sizzling puddle and slurping up the remains. Slimy shouted at the snail, finally getting its attention. It was one thing to steal his mushrooms, but dripping acid on his face and almost melting him crossed the line. The snail didn't seem to care. It kept eating and let out a small, pitiful whimper. Slimy snapped that playing the victim wasn't going to help. Still, as the snail lingered nearby, whimpering, Slimy hesitated. They were both low-level monsters, just trying to survive in a harsh world. Seeing how miserable it looked, he wondered if he was being too harsh. With a sigh, he decided to let it go, telling the snail he wouldn't make things difficult. There were plenty of mushrooms around anyway. The snail made a happy sound and went back to eating. Watching this, Slimy was reminded of those manga scenes where friendships were born from conflict. He started daydreaming about teaming up with the snail, growing stronger together, and increasing their chances of survival. In his imagination, they'd go on adventures, powered by friendship, eventually defeating some great demon king. Companions, he thought, were essential to surviving and growing stronger in this world. Moved by the idea, he crawled closer and suggested they team up, since they were both low-level monsters. He promised to watch each other's backs and make sure the snail always had mushrooms to eat. The snail looked at him happily. Then it suddenly lunged forward and bit off a chunk of Slimy's body. Pain shot through him as his HP dropped. It hurt a lot. In that instant, Slimy realized how naive he'd been. Monsters in this world didn't care about feelings. Nature was simple: eat or be eaten. He'd been fooled by the snail's pitiful act. Even though they were both low level, its strength was clearly higher than his. Deciding he needed to escape immediately, Slimy tried to pull away. The snail rose up and turned toward him, making it clear it had no intention of letting him go. Panicking, Slimy dumped his remaining skill points into pulsation. Pushing the skill to its limit, he surged forward. Both of them crawled across the dead tree, but after 3 exhausting minutes, they'd barely move. Worse, the snail was still right behind him. Slimy's panic grew when he realized its speed matched his own. The snail suddenly raised its head, its throat swelling. With a violent motion, it spewed acid liquor all over Slimy. His HP plummeted as his body split cleanly down the middle. For a brief moment, he wondered if his consciousness automatically stayed in the larger half. There was no time to think. The snail loomed over him, mouth open and dripping acid, then dove straight into his body and began eating. The half of Slimy that still held his mind barely managed to escape. He swore to himself that he'd endure this humiliation. For a slime mold, revenge could always come later. After finishing off the rest of Slimy's body, the snail turned back toward him. This time, Slimy had managed to grab hold of one of the mushrooms. As the snail charged again, Slimy activated Burst and jammed the toxic mushroom straight into its mouth. The snail immediately started thrashing and wailing as the poison took effect. Moments later, it collapsed beside Slimy, dead. The system notified him that he had defeated the snail and gained enough points to level up. Relief washed over him. He realized now why the snail always dissolved mushrooms with acid before eating them. It didn't have poison resistance at all. No matter how messy it had been, he had successfully defeated the first monster he'd faced in this world. Poking at the snail's corpse, Slimy wondered what kind of rewards he'd get from decomposing it. Crawling onto the body, he immediately noticed how sticky and gross the meat was. He tried to ignore the feeling, reminding himself that meat was meat. He even joked to himself about treating it like fancy French cuisine as he began decomposing it. The moment he did, an unbearable taste flooded his senses. It was absolutely vile, salty and sour at the same time, like thick mucus. A system window popped up, informing him that the decomposition had been terminated and that no experience points were gained. Still, he couldn't bring himself to throw it away. After all, this was a victory he'd earned by risking his life. Slimy reminded himself that if he wanted to survive, he had to get strong fast, and that meant he couldn't afford to be a picky eater. Gritting through it, figuratively holding his nose, even though he didn't actually have one, he forced himself to swallow the revolting meal. The forest echoed with wet, miserable retching sounds as his body spasmed and glitched like a broken mass of slime. He kept going anyway, shoving down the snail meat along with a few nearby mushrooms. When he finally finished, the system announced that decomposition was complete. He gained enough experience to level up from 6 to 7, and his body regenerated. Despite what the system claimed, he felt awful. He collapsed into a melted puddle beside the empty red shell, somehow feeling worse than before he'd eaten. Pulling up his status screen, he noted that he had 1.4 skill points available. His skills now read: Decomposition level 6, Pulsation level 3, Poison resistance level 3, and Burst level 1. He thought about what those actually meant in real life. Decomposition was basically just eating. Pulsation felt like running away. Poison resistance translated to getting beaten up and not dying. Burst? Also running away, just faster. Accepting his situation, he told himself that complaining was pointless for a slime mold. In his mind, he pictured powerful forest predators like giant hornets as massive, muscular monsters. With stats as low as his, he knew provoking them would be suicide, even if he somehow had attack skills. Survival came first. With that in mind, he dumped his points into pulsation again. The skill climbed to level 4. Excited, he immediately tested it, pushing his slime body as hard as he could and measuring how fast he moved across the log. His new top speed turned out to be 20 centimeters per second. At first, that sounded impressive, until he calculated it was only about 0.78 kilometers per hour. The realization crushed him. Even after all that effort, he was still painfully slow. A week later, Slimy lounged inside a hollow log, holding a red mushroom. The log had kept him safe, but he'd completely exhausted the nearby food supply and only gained 2 levels in all that time. It was clear he needed a new base. Before leaving, he decided to do one last big scavenging run to fill both his stomach and his inventory. Activating search, he flattened his body into a vein-like network, spreading out in multiple directions at once. The range expanded along with his HP, and his yellow slime stretched across the forest floor like a living map. The system notified him that 3 white mushrooms had been stored inside his body. Pushing farther, he collected 6 small grass mushrooms. With his refined body control, he could either store items or decompose them instantly, which made gathering far more efficient. He demonstrated this by consuming a cluster of blue mushrooms on the spot. He kept foraging and broke down a large blue mushroom. The system confirmed the decomposition, rewarding him with experience and raising his poison resistance to level 4. As he continued spreading his search network, one of his tendrils hit something hard and red. The system immediately warned that the target couldn't be decomposed. Before he could react, a sharp pain shot through him, costing him 9 HP. He pulled back instinctively, annoyed as he realized he'd run into that guy again. The attacker sprayed green corrosive liquid using acid liquor. Slimy was grazed, losing another 7 HP, but he was relieved that his improved speed let him dodge most of the attack. This was another acid snail, but this one was noticeably faster. He wondered if individuals of the same species could really vary this much in strength. Moving evasively, he felt confident the snail wouldn't land another hit. That confidence shattered when the snail suddenly unleashed a brutal close-range attack, splattering his body and dealing a massive 33 points of damage. The snail paused, seemingly thinking it was over. That pause was exactly what Slimy needed. He'd taken the hit on purpose to get close. Using Burst, he jammed a poisonous purple mushroom straight into the snail's mouth. In his mind, he mocked how easy it was to beat monsters once their weakness was known, chalking it up to the clear intelligence gap between them. The plan worked instantly. The acid snail convulsed as poison tore through its body. Slimy consumed the defeated enemy, once again forcing himself through the disgusting taste. The system rewarded him by boosting him from level 9 to 10. He sat there afterward in a melted heap, feeling miserable from the meal, but he couldn't deny it. The massive experience gained from monster meat made it worth it. Once he recovered, he left the red shell behind and continued moving through the grassy forest. As he traveled, he heard rustling ahead in the tall grass. Assuming it was just another weak snail, he arrogantly called out, ordering whatever was hiding to come out. What emerged instead made him freeze. It wasn't a snail at all, but a huge, horrifying centipede with blade-like legs. The towering insect cast a terrifying shadow over him, twitching its sharp blue limbs in a steady, threatening rhythm. Panicking, Slimy scrambled behind a rock, trembling as he realized he'd made a serious mistake. The centipede lunged. Desperate, Slimy tried his usual trick. He held up a poisonous mushroom and yelled for the monster to stay back. The attempt failed instantly. The centipede's mandibles sliced the mushroom clean in half before it could even be eaten. Slimy stared in disbelief as the pieces fell uselessly to the ground. The centipede followed up with a skill called Myriad Blade Strangle, wrapping its long body around him and squeezing. It buried its head into his slime, trying to bite and tear him apart. Then something unexpected happened. The centipede struggled. No matter how it attacked, it couldn't deal any damage. That's when Slimy realized the truth. His liquid body was immune to blades and constriction. In an instant, predator and prey swapped roles. Slimy engulfed the trapped centipede, happily accepting the delivered experience points as he consumed it. Riding that momentum, he continued hunting. He spotted a large green beetle resting on a rock. He tried to attack a flying hornet but could only watch it hover out of reach, annoyed that he was still too short. When he noticed a cockroach, he recoiled in pure disgust and decided to let it go, simply because he didn't want to eat it. Some time later, Slimy traveled through the forest in high spirits, humming to himself with a red mushroom held in his body. Opening his status window, he admired his progress. He was now a level 13 slime mold with 157 HP. Pulsation had climbed to level 8, and poison resistance to level 5. Leaning back against a patch of moss, he felt genuinely satisfied with how fast he was leveling now that he'd started eating meat. His confidence returned as he pictured his place in the food chain, above insects but still below frogs, lizards, and the terror bird. That was fine for now. It was time to aim higher. He set his sights on giant frog legs, imagining himself growing unstoppable, standing atop piles of insect corpses and ruling this new world someday. With that dream in mind, he arrived at the edge of a murky pond deep in the swamp forest. He studied the water, wondering what valuable resources might be hiding below and whether he could safely explore it. Deciding the only way to find out was to try, he slowly dipped a yellow tendril into the water. The reaction was instant and agonizing. The moment his tendril touched the water, Slimy felt his body swell like a balloon. Panic hit hard as pressure built from the inside, making him feel like he was seconds away from bursting. Through raw sensation rather than thought, he understood what was happening. As a single-celled organism, fresh water was rushing straight into him through osmotic pressure. If he submerged himself, he'd swell until he popped, just like a red blood cell in pure water. He yanked his limb back as fast as he could, relieved to still be intact but forced to abandon any ideas about underwater exploration. Before he could recover, bubbles started rising from the pond. A massive, dark green shape slowly pushed its way to the surface. As it emerged fully, Slimy stared in confusion before realizing what it was: a crab. The creature stood there blankly, foam bubbling from its mouth. Confusion quickly gave way to hunger as Slimy imagined a plate of steamed crab legs. After non-stop bug meals, this finally felt like real food. Trying to be clever, He called out from the shore in a friendly tone, pretending he just wanted to make friends. The crab ignored him completely and climbed onto a steep rock jutting out of the water, sitting there and blowing bubbles like nothing else existed. Slimy quickly got the message. It wasn't coming to him. Risking his life in the pond wasn't worth it. Instead, he started planning to dissolve poisonous mushrooms and dump the toxins into the water to kill the crab from a safe distance. That plan died instantly. The giant swamp crab activated a skill called Bubble Barrage, firing a high-pressure stream of water straight at him. The blast slammed into Slimy with terrifying force, knocking him backward and ripping 25 HP away. He was stunned that something as simple as water could hurt that badly. The crab fired again. Slimy scrambled to dodge, but still took another 10 damage as he barely escaped. He slid behind a thick tree root just in time, using it as a shield against the incoming water blast. His body trembled as he realized the truth. This thing was on a completely different level from the insects he'd been farming. Running now would only paint a bigger target on him, so he stayed hidden and waited, hoping the crab would lose interest. Then he heard a massive splash. Peeking out carefully, he wondered if the crab had finally given up. Instead, his blood ran cold as he saw the giant swamp crab climb out of the pond and onto land. Its claws snapped aggressively as it activated Dash, scuttling sideways with horrifying speed. Slimy watched in disbelief as the predator charged straight toward his hiding spot. Realizing the crab fully intended to eat him, he panicked and scrambled up the tree trunk. Clinging tightly to the bark, he glanced down and felt a brief wave of relief. At least up here, the water attacks wouldn't hit him. That relief vanished instantly. A chittering sound echoed above. Slimy looked up and saw a large, pale spider with glowing red eyes crawling down toward him. Unbothered at first, he waved a tentacle dismissively, telling it to move along since he was busy dealing with the crab. In his arrogance, he even warned the spider not to be rude, bragging that he'd eaten plenty of bugs just like it. The spider didn't retreat. It hissed, red eyes burning brighter, and suddenly struck with arachnid slash. Its front leg moved like a blade, slicing through Slimy's body at blinding speed. A massive chunk of slime was severed, dealing 30 damage, and the spider calmly caught and ate it. Slimy was stunned. He'd thought he was immune to blade attacks. A status window appeared, revealing the truth. The spider was a level 16 monster with swordsmanship level 8. Before he could even process that, another blast of high-pressure water slammed into the tree trunk inches from him. The splash alone dealt another 17 damage. Trapped between the blade-wielding spider above and the water-blasting crab below, Slimy felt despair close in. Staring up at the spider blocking his escape, he cursed his luck as tears welled up in his single eye. He was stuck. Again. Below, the crab fired another bubble barrage straight up the tree. Slimy dodged at the last possible second. The water beam missed him and slammed straight into the spider's face. The impact knocked the spider clean off the tree. The spider hit the ground in a fury and immediately retaliated, firing a stream of white webbing at the crab. The sticky silk wrapped around the giant swamp crab, slowing its movements. Taking advantage of the opening, the spider leapt forward and slashed at the crab's shell. The crab responded with crustacean carapace, hardening its shell to block the strike, then countered with crustacean clamp, snapping its claws viciously. The spider twisted away using arachnid silk control, binding the crab's claws even tighter with sticky webs. High above, Slimy watched the chaos unfold. Inside, he celebrated. His enemies were tearing each other apart just like he'd hoped. The battle raged on. The crab bubbled angrily, struggling to free its bound claws. The spider seized the moment and delivered a precise slash to the crab's eye stalk, triggering a burst of light and pain. It hissed, ready to finish the job. But the crab wasn't done. With a violent swing, it forced the spider to leap back. Still, the crab's massive claw remained trapped in thick webbing. Capitalizing on that weakness, the spider moved at blinding speed, wrapping the crustacean completely in silk. Soon, the giant swamp crab was helpless, cocooned like prey. The spider climbed onto its shell, ready to feast. From the tree, Slimy stared in disbelief. The smelly crab was tied up like something from a grocery store, and the smaller spider had completely flipped the fight. The spider loomed over the crab's face. The crab stared back, foam bubbling from its mouth. The bubbles gathered rapidly, glowing with intense pressure. Then everything exploded. A massive blade of compressed water erupted from the crab's mouth with a deafening roar. Water cutters spiraled outward, shredding the silk cocoon instantly. The spider was caught midair and sliced apart in an instant, its body torn into pieces. The desperate counterattack sent water blades flying in all directions. One sliced into the tree trunk, missing Slimy by inches. He shuddered, realizing the crab's survival instincts had triggered a terrifying hidden power. Below, the giant swamp crab collapsed, completely drained. It spat out one last weak stream of water before going still. The battlefield fell silent. The spider lay in pieces, and the crab lay motionless, wrapped in torn webbing. Slimy waited behind the tree roots until he was sure the attacks had stopped. When the danger finally passed, he emerged cautiously. Approaching the immobilized crab, he mocked it for wasting all its energy firing wildly and ending up in such a pathetic state. Still, he faced a problem. The creature was tough. Suffocating it was risky, and its clamped mouth meant he couldn't shove mushrooms inside. He needed to act fast before it recovered. Scanning the area, his gaze landed on a large, heavy rock. Spreading his body over it, he tried to store it using slime space. A system error flashed, insufficient space. He realized his storage capacity depended on his HP, which was still too low after the fight. Making a hard choice, he vomited up his entire mushroom collection to free inventory space. With nothing left stored, he successfully absorbed the massive rock. His yellow body bulged under the weight, slamming into the ground with a heavy thud. Complaining internally about how heavy it was, he dragged himself forward and slowly climbed the tree. Reaching a position directly above the trapped crab, he looked down and calmly declared that he had come to take its life. Letting gravity do the work, Slimy released his grip. He dropped like a stone. The giant swamp crab looked up in terror as a massive yellow mass fell from the sky. In a final desperate move, it fired one last high-pressure stream of water upward. The water jet struck the falling slime and rock, but the momentum was unstoppable. Slimy grit through the pain, refusing to back down. He was going to crush his enemy, no matter what it took. Below him, the crab braced as a massive shadow swallowed it whole. Then came the impact. With a deafening crash, the rock-filled slime mold slammed straight into the crab's shell, sending out a violent shockwave. When the dust finally settled, Slimy was perched on top of a completely crushed shell. The system confirmed the kill and rewarded him with enough experience to reach level 14, along with half a skill point. Relief and joy hit him all at once. Still alive. Still standing. He burst into wild laughter, celebrating the fact that he was the last one left alive. Not wasting a second, he settled onto his fresh kill and happily declared it was time to eat. Perched on the overturned shell like a chef, Slimy carefully arranged the crab's organs and roe inside it, turning the shell into a makeshift soup bowl. He ignored the spider remains entirely. Using a piece of crab leg as a utensil, he dipped the white meat into the rich yellow roe and took his first bite. The flavor overwhelmed him. After days of moldy wood, snails, and insects, the taste of fresh seafood exploded across his senses. Tears streamed down his slimy face as he realized something important. Good food really did heal the soul. In that moment, he renewed his determination to survive in this brutal world, if only to keep finding meals like this. He ate everything, leaving nothing behind. Completely stuffed, he sprawled across a log, satisfied and content. A status window popped up, showing he was now level 14 with 168 HP. His body felt refreshed, energized, and whole again. With his hunger gone, Slimy decided to put that energy toward an experiment. He positioned himself in front of a rock and focused inward, concentrating on his internal structure. Tensing his entire body, he squeezed with everything he had. His single eye bulged from the strain as he tried to force something out, screaming internally from the effort. Panting, he glared at the rock, demanding the power to come out. His thoughts drifted back to the crab's bubble barrage. Skills could be learned through practice, right? The crab compressed water to fire it, so why couldn't a slime mold do the same? Fired up, he squeezed his internal fluids again, chanting for the attack to appear. He tried copying the crab's technique, but only a few weak squirts shot out of his backside in completely the wrong direction. He tried again, aiming forward this time, straining noisily. The yellow liquid just dribbled out uselessly. Exhausted, he collapsed into a puddle, complaining that he couldn't control either the direction or the force. For a moment, he felt defeated. Then the frustration hardened into resolve. Refusing to give up, he tensed every part of his body, compressing his internal fluids to their absolute limit. Suddenly, a high-speed jet of yellow fluid blasted out with tremendous force. His burst skill activated automatically. The projectile slammed into the crab shell, punching a clean hole straight through it. A system message appeared, announcing that burst had evolved into a new skill, cytoplasm jet. The system explained that the skill launched his own cytoplasm as a projectile, using his body mass as ammunition. Slimy laughed out loud. The fact that skills could evolve through sheer practice thrilled him. Then a worrying thought hit him. His other skills had cooldowns. What if this one did too? To test it, he fired again. Then again. A rapid barrage of yellow shots tore into the shell. The system confirmed there was no cooldown. As he continued firing, the skill leveled up to level 2. That excitement faded quickly when he looked at himself. His body had shriveled into a thin, pitiful stick. A warning flashed, his health was critical. Each shot was consuming his own biomass as ammo. That meant his body was his only combat resource. Slightly disappointed that he couldn't become some kind of mage, he went back to eating the crab to restore his lost mass. While eating, an idea sparked. If eating restored him, what about the parts of himself that had been cut off earlier? He searched the area and found a large chunk of yellow slime lying in the grass. It looked way bigger than he expected. He wondered if he'd really lost that much when the spider sliced him. Curious, he pressed the separated piece against his main body and activated reclamation. As it was absorbed, flashes of memory flooded in. He saw the fight with the spider. He saw the rock falling. But the perspective was wrong, it wasn't his own. That's when he realized it. The severed piece had experienced things independently. Something clicked. Separated parts of his body, even without true consciousness, could still decompose things on their own. By reabsorbing them later, he could collect both the health and experience they gained. Delighted, Slimy hummed happily, convinced he'd just discovered a system exploit. He imagined sending fragments of himself in all directions, turning one mouth into many and skyrocketing his leveling speed. He tested the idea immediately using division. A small chunk split off, costing him 10 HP. Both the main body and the fragment looked weak. That's when he noticed the limitation. If his HP dropped below 30, he entered a dangerous starvation state. With a max HP of 198, he reasoned that as long as he had enough food, he could make plenty of clones safely. Straining again, he tore off a much larger chunk, taking 30 damage. The separated yellow blob wiggled and moved on its own. It worked. In his mind, he imagined himself wearing a ninja headband. The ability felt just like the shadow clone technique from Manga. Pumped with excitement, he raised an imaginary fist and declared it was time to get to work. He ordered one clone to decompose a dead log and sent others toward a nearby mushroom pile. His status screen showed a level 14 slime mold with 198 HP and skills including decomposition, pulsation, poison resistance, and cytoplasm jet. The plan felt solid. Let the clones farm resources while he stayed safe, eating leftover spider meat and keeping his main body at full health. Mastering his body more and more, he imagined himself with a cool armored humanoid shape. Confidence surged as he visualized attacks passing harmlessly through him. A normal thrust? Useless. A powerful slash? His body would just reconnect. Physical attacks couldn't threaten him. Still, his expression grew serious. There was one thing he hadn't tested yet. Magic. He wondered if magic could kill him where physical attacks failed. Maybe he hadn't seen magic yet because this world was closer to a savage animal kingdom than a fantasy one. Deciding to experiment further, he set a trap near the murky water, using small pieces of his yellow body as bait. A giant swamp crab burst from the pond and grabbed one piece. He'd already laid a trail of slime chunks leading inland. More crabs followed the trail, happily feeding, unaware they were walking into a kill zone. High above, Slimy clung to a tree branch, watching as the crabs gathered below. When they finally looked up, it was too late. A massive shadow fell over them as he shoved the branch loose. The branch crashed down with devastating force, instantly crushing the crabs. System notifications flooded in. Killing 6 crabs at once pushed him from level 14 to 15. He dropped down, finished off any survivors with a rock, and started eating. After decomposing the meat, his health fully recovered. He glanced at the clean shells, satisfied with how efficient his farming method had become. Feeling stronger than ever, he decided to practice combat. Setting up a crab shell against a rock, he imagined himself as a cool gunslinger, preparing a move he proudly named Plasmodial Barrage. In reality, he unleashed a storm of yellow slime bullets, hammering the target with speed and force. Smoke rose from the shell as the system announced that cytoplasm jet had leveled up from 5 to 6. The intense training, however, began to take its toll. The slime mold was left shriveled and cracked, his body dried out and his health hanging by a thread after using his own mass as ammunition. To pull himself out of the autophagy state, he sluggishly ate a mushroom, feeling his form slowly plump back up. Looking back on the last 2 days, he noted that the non-stop training had paid off. Both the power and accuracy of his attacks were noticeably better. He ran through the numbers in his head and realized he could only fire about 30 cytoplasm jet shots before his health dropped into dangerous territory. That limit bothered him. He started wondering how to make each shot deadlier without burning through more of his own body. As he picked up a poisonous mushroom and then a nearby rock, an idea clicked. If he could add ingredients to his ammo, the shots wouldn't have to rely on raw force alone. Wrapping a poisonous mushroom inside a slime projectile should let him inflict poison damage from a distance. Encasing a rock, on the other hand, would massively boost physical impact. Without hesitation, he tested it. The rock-infused shot slammed into its target with a sharp crack, proving the concept instantly. Pleased with himself, he smugly decided he was a genius for inventing such a flexible attack. His celebration was cut short by a soft cooing sound. He noticed a strange glow coming from a hollow in a nearby tree and wondered if it was just a bird or maybe fireflies. Curiosity won out. He climbed the trunk and peeked straight into the glowing hole. What he saw nearly stopped his core. A spectral, glowing blue owl stared back at him. Its magical aura was unmistakable. Panic exploded through him as his worst fear became reality. This was a monster that used magic. Terrified of being hit by a spell, he dropped from the tree and fled as fast as he could. The owl didn't chase him. It simply remained perched, silently watching him run. What he didn't know was that this wasn't a wild monster at all, but a magical skill called symbiotic scrying. Far away, a human woman held her hand up like a telescope. Her right eye glowed with the same blue light as the owl's, sharing its vision. She rode atop a massive armored boar alongside 2 other adventurers. When a bearded man asked if she'd found anything, she lowered her hand and casually replied that it was nothing important, just a strange little monster. The group continued through the forest. A pink-haired scout commented that it felt odd not encountering any high-level monsters. The bearded warrior told Little Steel to stay sharp and lead, worried that their magical link to the guild master had gone quiet. Meanwhile, the slime mold was in full panic mode. Convinced the owl had marked him, he fled blindly, knowing better than to mess with magic users. He reached a river and hesitated, unsure how to cross. Then he remembered physics, momentum mattered. He launched himself into the air and, mid-flight, activated Plasmodial Barrage. Instead of attacking, he fired backward, using the shots as propulsion. The plan worked, but it cost him 80 HP. He rocketed over the river, crashing hard on the other side, exhausted but alive. Believing he'd escaped, he gnawed on dead wood to recover. Even as his health stabilized, he admitted to himself that while he was strong for his level, a true high-tier enemy would kill him instantly. Then the air changed. A terrifying pressure slammed down on him, wrapped in a dark, fiery red aura. He froze, sensing something far worse than the snake-tailed terror bird. Assuming the magic owl had found him, he slowly turned, only to realize the source of fear wasn't the owl at all. Lying on the forest floor was a colossal severed claw, white-scaled with a black nail, so massive it crushed trees beneath it. His single eye struggled to process what he was seeing. A giant finger. Fear twisted instantly into greedy excitement. To him, this was a legendary golden finger, the kind of cheat-like power-up whispered about in stories. If he absorbed it, he was sure it would grant immense power, maybe even a massive evolution. Laughing wildly at his luck, he spread his body over the scales and activated dissolution, wrapping slime tendrils around the limb. Almost immediately, pain ripped through him. The object resisted digestion fiercely. A system alert flashed, decomposition failed. His skill was too low, or the level gap was simply too large. The limb's invulnerability activated, its overwhelming power repelling his cells. Instead of gaining experience, he started taking damage in wave. Realizing he was killing himself, he activated autotomy and severed the connection. A chunk of his body tore away as he recoiled. Staring at the finger again, he felt nothing but regret as tiny +1 experience messages floated up mockingly. He cursed himself for not upgrading decomposition sooner. The treasure was right there, yet completely unusable. He couldn't digest it, and his inventory was far too small to store it. Reluctantly, he decided to leave it behind, grind levels, max out his skill, and come back later. That plan shattered instantly. The ground began to rumble violently. The severed finger suddenly glowed, erupting with energy before blasting straight out of the earth. It tore through soil, rock, and trees, shooting into the sky. Shockwaves and debris exploded outward. He spotted a blast racing toward him and barely survived as it carved a massive crater nearby. Trembling, he crawled beneath a tree root, shaken to his core. The world suddenly felt terrifyingly vast. The farther he traveled, the smaller he felt. His arrogance drained away, replaced by caution. He chose to return to basics, hiding, decomposing dead wood, and growing stronger safely. Deep underground, the severed finger finally came to rest. In the darkness, it sat still, then erupted with a terrifying red and black aura, revealing it was far more than a dead limb. Checking his mental map, the slime mold confirmed the golden finger was far northeast and the magic owl far southwest. He was safely between them, deep in dense forest. He chose a thick tree and decided to set up a temporary base. Using dissolution, he melted into the trunk, planning a narrow entrance to block large monsters while hollowing out a spacious interior. Imagining himself in a hard hat, he eagerly excavated layer by layer. For light, he planted a glowing mushroom that emitted faint poison with its blue shine. Exhausted but satisfied, he collapsed onto a moss bed he'd gathered. A stone table sat nearby, the entrance plugged with poison mushrooms, a decoy tunnel below, and a hidden passage leading to his true chamber. It was clever, safe, and his. Relaxing at last, he lay back, chewing on a twig like a cigar, enjoying the feeling of security. Then a loud, rhythmic buzzing vibrated through the wood. Annoyed, he poked his head out and shouted at the noise, only to see a massive swarm of wasps filling the canopy. Instead of fear, his eye narrowed with calculation. An idea formed. He fired a cytoplasm jet and smashed a wasp out of the air. Then he openly sat at his entrance, taunting the swarm. Enraged, they dove at him, stingers thrusting. He retreated instantly into the narrow tunnel, causing the wasps to miss or get stuck. Inside, he sighed in relief as the system notified him of effortless experience gains. His sticky body worked like flypaper. Letting 2 wasps escape on purpose, he followed them back to a massive nest high in the trees. From a branch, he studied it, already planning its destruction. When he revealed himself, sentries released pheromones and the sky filled with buzzing. Thousands poured out. Confident that stings were useless, he welcomed the experience, until the wasps formed a tight, vibrating ball around him. Heat surged. A system warning screamed as his cells began dying. Horrified, he realized they were cooking him alive. Panicking, he unleashed plasmodial barrage, shredding the formation. Then new enemies appeared, armored wasp guards with beeswax shields that blocked his shots. Worse still, he spotted a white-furred insect wielding a staff. A glowing magic circle formed overhead. A wasp mage. The hierarchy was clear, and his greatest fear, magic, stood right in front of him. As guards charged, he fired non-stop, anchoring himself to the branch and decomposing wood to regenerate health mid-battle. When guards crashed into him, he mocked them as his body trapped and dissolved them alive. With storage full, he improvised, turning a wasp spear into a reinforced projectile. The enhanced shot shattered a shield and skewered its target. Seeing its defenses broken, the wasp mage ordered a retreat. The swarm fled. He remained on the branch, watching them go, scoffing as he decided they'd run because they finally understood how dangerous he was. A thick golden substance started pooling together, twisting and swirling until it formed a smooth, glowing orb. A slimy creature freezes nearby, staring at it like it's the only thing in the world. One thought loops in its mind: that has to be bee honey, and I need to taste it. But the honey isn't unprotected. A large, regal bee mage drifts into view, staff in hand. With a smooth flick of its wand, it gathers mana and forms a small orb of fire. Basic stuff, a beginner spell called Spark Ember. The fireball launches, and slams straight into the slimy, detonating on impact. The slimy jolts back. The hit is brutal, and completely unexpected. The bee mage doesn't slow down. Hovering in place, it fires off 2 more embers in rapid succession. The flames weave cleanly through the trees and smash into the slimy again. Panic sets in. Fire magic is the slimy's worst matchup, and the honey coating its body only makes things worse. Even with its slow regeneration kicking in, it knows the truth. This fight is impossible. It turns to flee, but it's too late. Another fireball slams home, cutting off any chance of escape. Desperate, the slimy fires back, launching a chunk of its own body in a move called Plasmodial Barrage. The attack is fast and sloppy, but it never reaches its target. 2 smaller bee soldiers flash into existence beside the mage, and together they cast twin beeswax barrier. A glowing, hex-shaped shield snaps into place. The slimy's attack splatters uselessly against the barrier. It stares stunned. Offensive magic, defensive buffs. Of course they have both. Completely unfair. That's when more fire rains down from above. The bee mage shifts tactics and casts Swarm Summon. From the hive, a wave of small, glowing bees pours out. They don't hesitate. Each one dives straight at the slimy and explodes. The forest shakes as blast after blast rocks the area, hammering the creature without mercy. Barely holding itself together, the slimy ends up stranded on a high tree branch. Its body quivers, barely clinging on. From a distance, the bee mage watches in silence. For the final move, the mage floats closer and presses its wand against the branch. With a clean, sawing motion, it cuts through the wood. The branch cracks and snaps. The slimy falls straight down toward the same pool of golden honey it wanted so badly. As it plummets, the bee mage gathers power, standing over the honey as energy swells into a massive fireball, far bigger than anything before. The entire swarm goes quiet, watching. With one final motion, the mage releases the spell. The colossal fireball roars downward, aimed at the helpless slimy and the honey below, ready to erase everything in a single, overwhelming explosion. The colossal fireball slams into the ground, detonating in a massive blast that swallows the honey pool and the falling slimy decoy. Smoke, fire, and debris roar into the air as the bee mage and its soldiers watch in tense silence. For a moment, it looks like the fight is finally over. Then something moves. A lone bee soldier buzzes uneasily, sensing something off. The others turn just in time to see a small chunk of slimy push up from the forest floor. In a flash, it launches forward and slaps onto the bee mage. While the main bee forces focused on the decoy outside, the nest itself had been left nearly undefended. From the very beginning, Slimy had been stretching its body underground, slowly forming a hidden tunnel straight into the heart of the hive. The creature shoved onto the branch and dropped into the explosion wasn't the real one at all, just a split-off decoy made at huge cost to Slimy's health. While the bees poured everything they had into destroying it, the real Slimy slipped away through its secret passage. Now deep inside the hive, Slimy slides through tight honeycomb corridors. It sends out thin tendrils, feeling its way through the maze. It passes a chamber overflowing with honey but doesn't stop. This can wait. What it's after is far more important. its tendrils suddenly break into a vast chamber. There, exposed and massive, is the Bee Queen. Before the royal guards can react, Slimy warned them not to move, saying their queen's life was in his hands as he threatened her with a rock. The queen screamed as he tightened around her, her pain echoing through the hive. The mage didn't hesitate and ordered the warriors to attack. Watching them rush him, Slimy felt a flash of disappointment. There was clearly no room for negotiation. In response, he crushed the queen's body and tore her head apart. The mage wasp froze in horror as the hive began collapsing almost instantly. Slimy hadn't expected it, but the queen bee functioned like a core machine. Once she was destroyed, the entire swarm naturally broke down and disintegrated. He'd briefly considered talking things out, but it became clear that even creatures with social structures were still driven by instinct at a low level. The system chimed in, informing him that he had met the requirements to level up. It also warned him that decomposing B-rank parts would no longer give experience after 24 hours, and that any HP exceeding his maximum would be cleared within an hour. He had reached level 21. This decomposition had greatly increased his poison resistance, and he'd unexpectedly unlocked a new skill called Central Command. However, when he tried to put a skill point into it, the system told him he didn't have enough subordinates to use it. He'd originally planned to max out his decomposition skill for future scavenging, but learned the hard way that racial skills couldn't be upgraded with points. With no other option, he put his points into pulsation instead. Luckily, this haul had been rich in resources. As his HP increased, the slime mold space inside his body expanded too, and the honey he'd collected felt like pure treasure. Still, when he looked back at the ruined hive, he couldn't shake the strange mix of emotions stirring inside him, despite not even having a heart anymore. Ever since he'd turned the tables on the snail, he'd officially stepped onto the path of predation. Yet something felt off. His thoughts drifted to the crab's child, imagining the little one waiting and wondering why his father hadn't come back to play like he promised. He pictured the crab telling his wife he'd be late because of work, asking her to explain it to their child. The mother would reassure the baby, saying his dad was working hard and just needed time. But as hours passed, even she would start to worry. It had gotten so late, and there hadn't even been a call. She might have wondered if he'd passed out drunk somewhere. Eventually, she'd decide to go look for him, bringing the baby along. On the road, the baby crab would be singing his favorite anime song until his mother told him to quiet down so he wouldn't disturb anyone. Then they'd spot a man stumbling toward them. The baby would recognize him instantly and call out, confused about why his dad was walking the wrong way. His mother would sigh and say he was obviously drunk, telling her son to go help him. The baby would run over happily, only for everything to fall apart when the crab suddenly turned around, revealing that he'd been turned into a zombie. A slime monster had taken over his body, eating him from the inside. The imagined scream echoed in Slimy's mind, making him think he'd become the villain of the story. But then he snapped out of it. He realized he was overthinking things, probably because his mental foundation was still human. That lingering guilt came from who he used to be. Now, he was a slime mold in another world. He didn't have the luxury of choice. If he didn't hunt, he'd be hunted. The weak were food for the strong. That was just how nature worked. To survive in this ice sky, hunting and decomposition were his only real options. Material foundation determined the superstructure, so survival came first. With that decided, he turned his focus to reclaiming the split body he'd released earlier that morning, curious about what surprises it might bring. He rushed toward the location. As he got close, he slowed down, confused by the sight of a campfire. He crept forward and hid behind some bushes, wondering if humans were nearby. Sure enough, a hunter party was sprawled around the fire. One of the men casually asked Nia if she wasn't worried about getting poked while leaning against the pig. Slimy was surprised. It really was humans. Nia replied that the steelback's bristles were soft when it was relaxed, thanking it for its hard work and saying they'd be counting on it again tomorrow. Carter explained that they'd originally been searching for their guildmaster, but somehow ended up lost themselves. As captain, he blamed himself and apologized to the team. Cole pointed out that magic communication had been cut off, there were no signs of high-level magical beasts, and even the forest itself felt like a maze. With so many strange things happening at once, no one could have predicted this. He told Carter not to beat himself up. Even though they hadn't found the guildmaster, there was no need to panic. After all, he ranked among the top 3 strongest leaders of the 8 great guilds. Once they found their way back, they could just report everything to the church. Carter agreed that the guildmaster's strength was unquestionable, but reminded them that he'd been missing for 2 whole years. Rumors had spread that the church was suspicious of him, especially since he disappeared shortly after accepting a mission personally assigned by the Pope. 10 years ago, Guildmaster Goon founded the 100-Style Guild. Unlike other guilds with strict requirements, his guild accepted anyone regardless of race, profession, or level, as long as they followed its principles. No deception, no abuse, no evil. Every reward Goon earned from monster subjugation was distributed fairly, helping all members grow. Because of that, the 100-Style Guild became famous for its generosity and unity, quickly rising to become one of the 8 great guilds. But that rapid growth also drew suspicion from the church. 2 years ago, Goon left for the swamp forest on a mission and never returned. Without his protection, members were poached or drifted away, and the once glorious guild fell into a fragile state. Goon had seen potential in Carter, which was why Carter formed this squad to search for news about him. In the end, only Nia and Cole answered his call, and he was genuinely grateful to them. Nia told him not to worry, saying that without Goon and the 100-Style Guild, someone with a niche profession like hers might never have become an adventurer at all. Cole laughed and said that with her ability to control intermediate magical beasts, plenty of guilds would fight to recruit her. Even if something had happened to Goon, she wouldn't need to worry about finding a new place to belong. Nia snapped at him to shut his mouth and go to sleep, while Cole quickly told her to just pretend he hadn't said anything. As the group settled down, Slimy tried to eavesdrop, but from where he was hiding, everything sounded muffled and unclear. Gathering information from humans felt important if he wanted to understand this world properly, so he decided to take a risk. He stretched out a thin part of his body, using it like an antenna, slowly sending it toward the hunters to listen in. He barely had time to process what was happening when Cole suddenly sensed something wrong and instantly stabbed the extended slime with an ice spike. The system immediately warned Slimy that frost was super effective against him, reducing his speed by 90%. Panic hit him hard. Cole calmly told the others not to worry, saying he'd already dealt with it, but the rest of the party was alert now, scanning the area. They soon spotted the slime impaled on the ice spike. The steelback boar walked over, sniffed it, and then casually bit the slime off the ice. Before Slimy could react, the boar started slurping him up like a noodle, dragging him toward its mouth. Slimy was sure this was about to be an instant game over, until Nia shouted for the steelback to stop. She said they shouldn't kill things indiscriminately. It was just a small, passing monster and clearly not a threat, so there was no reason to eat it. Reluctantly, the steelback spat Slimy out, and he landed right in Nia's hand. As she held him, she frowned slightly, saying he felt familiar, like she'd seen him somewhere before. Half curious, half serious, she asked if he wanted to form a monster contract with her. To Slimy, she looked like a literal angel. The idea of finally experiencing those classic ice-sky bonds made him instantly agree in his heart. Before anything could happen, Carter cut in and told her to stop fooling around. They still needed to find their way out of the forest tomorrow, and now wasn't the time to be collecting monsters. He added that wasting mana on a low-level slime was pointless. That comment hit Slimy harder than the ice spike. Nia shrugged and let him go. As Slimy landed on the ground, he realized something important. They couldn't hear him speak at all. That realization sparked an idea. Slowly, he stretched his body again, shaping himself carefully in front of them. The hunters stared as Slimy formed the word, hello, using his slime body, fully expecting them to be shocked by his intelligence. Instead, they looked mildly disgusted and assumed he was excreting waste. That's when it hit him. They didn't speak Chinese. The realization deflated him instantly. Any attempt at communication would probably just get him labeled as a weird monster and killed on the spot. Deciding it was safer to give up, Slimy retreated. At least now he knew humans existed in this world. Unfortunately, there was also a very real language barrier standing between them. Under the moonlight, the slime mold bounced across the water, quickly putting distance between himself and the humans he'd just run into. Once he landed safely on the grass, he pulled back the magical threat he'd been holding onto. Magical surveillance was still his biggest weakness, and the last thing he wanted was to run into that spectral owl again. To distract himself, he decided to test out a new skill he'd picked up during the wasp fight. When he activated Nucleus Command, a digital grid spread out around him, scanning the area. His senses sharpened instantly, turning into something like a living radar. Soft beeps echoed in his awareness as the blue grid expanded through the trees, mapping the dark forest around him. He settled onto a rock and waited. The scan locked onto something familiar. He felt it immediately, one of his split bodies. That's when it clicked. Nucleus Command wasn't just scanning the environment. It was tracking pieces of himself. He shot through the forest, following the signal as it grew stronger. Soon, it led him to a fallen log where a huge, glowing yellow mass pulsed softly. He froze in shock. His clone had grown massive on its own. For a moment, he wondered just how much it had decomposed while he was gone. Without hesitation, he activated Reclamation and merged back with the oversized clone, pulling in all its nutrients. The system instantly announced a massive boost in experience and HP. Energized, he leapt away, chasing the next signal and continuing his harvest. Another clone was found and absorbed, pushing his poison resistance up to level 8. With the combined experience, he leveled up again, reaching level 22. Landing back on the grass, he felt eager to keep going. He activated Nucleus Command once more, but this time, the signal was weak, barely beeping. Confused, he scanned the area frantically, trying to figure out what happened. Then he noticed movement near a patch of mushrooms. His focus snapped into place just in time to see the problem. An acid snail was chewing on his clone. Furious, he shouted at the creature and fired a jet of cytoplasm straight at it. The blast knocked the snail away, leaving the clone shaking where it lay. For a split second, he treated it like a bullied kid, mentally promising to protect it this time. He moved in to reclaim what was left. Then everything went wrong. A fast red blur slammed down from above, smashing the mushrooms apart. A long, sticky tongue shot out and scooped up the clone right in front of him. Before he could react, a fat green frog swallowed it whole and let out a satisfied croak. The slime mold stared in disbelief as the frog burped. Just like that, his experience was gone. Shock turned into pure rage. Staring the frog down, he silently swore the disgusting thing would pay for stealing his clone. He fired a plasmodial barrage, launching a hardened projectile straight at it. The frog noticed too late. The shot slammed into its face and sent it tumbling backward. Seeing it fall, the slime mold scoffed, thinking he'd gotten strong enough to take on even bigger threats now. But that confidence didn't last long. To his disbelief, the frog wasn't finished. It opened its mouth and casually caught the projectile, completely unharmed. Before he could fire again, the frog leapt high into the air and splashed into the river, disappearing beneath the surface. The slime mold rushed to the edge of the rock, shouting that it couldn't escape. The frog's head popped back up, croaking mockingly from the safety of the water. Refusing to let it go, he fired a volley into the river. Every shot splashed uselessly across the surface, losing momentum instantly. Frustrated, he stopped. It finally hit him. He couldn't touch it while it stayed underwater. Suddenly, the frog burst out of the river. Watching closely, the slime mold assumed it needed air and confidently declared that weakness meant it was dead. But he was wrong. The frog pushed off the water itself, releasing power and launching toward shore like a living missile, its mouth wide open. He barely dodged as it crashed into the rock where he'd been standing. While the frog recovered, he fired a stone-hardened barrage that struck its eye with perfect accuracy. As soon as the hit landed, he retreated up a tree. Perched on a branch, he realized what had happened. The frog had baited him toward the water. After so many easy wins, he'd gotten careless. He reminded himself that a hunter could turn into prey in an instant. Below, the frog clutched its bleeding eye, furious. It glared up and croaked angrily, then ignored the pain and leapt straight for the tree. Panic hit when the slime mold realized he was out of stone ammo. He fired liquid slime shots instead. It didn't help. The frog opened its mouth and caught every projectile, swallowing them midair. The slime mold froze in horror as he realized his attacks were literally feeding it. Even injured, the frog climbed the tree, closing in fast. By the time he understood the danger, it was too late. The frog's tongue shot out and wrapped tightly around him. A brutal tug-of-war followed, the slime mold clinging to a branch while the heavy frog yanked downward. The strain became unbearable. The branch cracked, then snapped. As he fell, clutching the broken wood in terror, he saw the frog waiting below with its mouth wide open. In that split second, he used reverse momentum. Wrapping himself around the broken branch, he angled the sharp end downward and thrust it forward, screaming for it to eat this instead. The jagged wood pierced straight through the frog's mouth and into its brain. The impact sent the frog crashing back, blood spraying as the slime mold remained safe above. The lifeless body fell into the river with a heavy splash, ending the fight. Clinging to the tree trunk, he finally relaxed, relieved it was over. Below, the frog's corpse sank into the dark water, blood spreading before disappearing into the depths. Looking down, he felt a twinge of regret. It was a waste, he couldn't decompose it down there. Then the water started bubbling. Two glowing, menacing eyes opened in the depths, staring straight up at him. A beam of light exploded from the water, slicing through the air beside him. The blast struck the tree trunk and cut through it effortlessly. The next moment, the tree and the screaming slime mold were launched into the night sky. From the water below, the enemy revealed its new form, a pale, glowing entity with burning red eyes, activating sanctified fall. The slime mold was completely thrown off by the enemy's sudden transformation. He shouted in disbelief, wondering how a frog that was clearly dead could come back with this kind of power. The sanctified frog dragged itself free from the shattered tree, its glowing red eyes locked onto him with pure hatred as it prepared to finish the job. Without warning, swollen growths on the frog's eyes burst open, firing high-pressure streams of blood like laser beams. The slime mold barely dodged in time. The corrosive blood sliced into the tree where he'd just been, and in that instant he knew he was outmatched. He shot a strand of slime upward, snagged a higher branch, and swung away, leaping rapidly from tree to create distance. As he fled, his mind raced. A smart mold knew when to retreat. Still, it didn't make sense. This was supposed to be a low-level monster. Why did it have a third form when others barely lasted a second? Something about it felt wrong, and that only reinforced his decision to run. The sanctified frog refused to let him go. It roared and gave chase, moving with an unnatural speed. Using its tongue like a grappling hook, it swung through the air, matching the slime mold's movements almost perfectly and closing the gap fast. The frog unleashed sanguine lash. A whip of solidified blood tore through the air and sliced clean through one of the slime mold's tendrils, dealing 199 damage. He lost his grip and fell as a system alert screamed that a foreign substance had invaded his body. He realized the frog's blood was so toxic that even his level 8 poison resistance couldn't block it. The frog didn't stop. Diving down, it activated tongue lash. Its long, blood-red tongue shot out like a harpoon, wrapping tightly around the slime mold and yanking him downward. Even then, he scoffed, noticing the damage was only 1 point. He figured physical attacks meant nothing to a liquid body like his. That confidence vanished the moment he hit the river. Fresh water, his worst possible weakness. A red warning flashed as his cell osmotic pressure spiked dangerously, telling him to escape immediately or die. Before he could react, the sanctified frog lunged forward, jaws wide. Its mouth snapped shut, swallowing him whole. The frog floated on the water, looking satisfied. But then its mouth bulged and twitched. Inside, the slime mold was still alive, struggling desperately. The frog clamped its jaws tighter, forcing him down its throat. In the stomach, he was submerged in digestive acid, watching in horror as his HP drained at 33 damage per second. Panic overwhelmed him. He tried to eject his core, but exhaustion dragged him down. His split skill wouldn't activate. Above the surface, the sanctified frog croaked triumphantly, splashing as if celebrating its victory. Inside, being dissolved alive, the slime mold made a desperate decision. Instead of resisting the water, he leaned into it. He intentionally triggered his osmotic weakness. By absorbing water, his body began to expand rapidly inside the frog's throat. The frog immediately sensed something was wrong. It grabbed at its neck as it bulged unnaturally. The slime mold kept expanding, forcing himself into the frog's mouth and throat, determined to choke the monster to death by sheer size. To survive the damage while growing, the slime mold burned through every drop of hornet honey he had, restoring 400 HP per use just to keep expanding. With constant regeneration, his body ballooned to an enormous size, stretching the frog beyond its limits. Then it burst. With a massive explosion, the sanctified frog was torn apart from the inside. Blood and gore sprayed across the water as the slime mold's expansion completely destroyed it. Victorious, he floated on the river like a mountain of green slime as the system confirmed the kill and awarded experience. It also informed him that surviving the toxic blood had granted him a new antibody. Drifting among the swamp trees, he stared at his massive new form in disbelief. A status window popped up, showing a new passive ability. Osmotic Pressure Regulation, MAC. His HP had skyrocketed to 11,700, far beyond his normal max of 924. But a timer warned him that the excess health would vanish in 1 hour. He studied himself carefully. His size let him float like an iceberg. His lower body absorbed water, but his sheer volume allowed him to balance the pressure safely. Full water immunity wasn't something he'd planned, but it was a huge bonus from his reckless gamble. Then he noticed the timer again. Nearly 10,000 extra HP, making him practically invincible, was about to disappear. His expression shifted, turning serious and greedy. He'd burned all his precious honey to reach this form, so he needed to squeeze every possible benefit out of it. He laughed wildly, imagining himself as an unstoppable kaiju. That's when an idea hit him, something like that rolling sticky ball game. He decided to roll through the forest and collect everything in his path. In his massive form, he barreled through the flooded forest like a natural disaster. Vegetation vanished beneath him as system notifications popped up non-stop, confirming decomposition and awarding experience. He plowed through trees and brush, efficiently farming resources before the time limit ran out. Underwater, fish swam peacefully among the roots, until he crashed in. The fish scattered instantly. He tried hunting them, but it was pointless. Even immune to pressure, the water slowed him too much, and the agile fish weren't worth the effort. Annoyed, he hauled his massive body back onto dry land. Nearby, a cluster of mushrooms sat at the base of a tree. He flowed over them, absorbing them instantly and leaving a hollow trail behind. Moving deeper inland, he spotted 2 small otter-like creatures standing proudly with a freshly caught fish. The enormous slime mold loomed over them, loudly greeting them and casting a massive shadow. Before they could react, He lunged and slammed down with his sticky body. He didn't eat them. Instead, he rolled away, casually announcing that he was taking their fish. The otters were left sitting in the dirt, drenched in green slime, staring in traumatized silence as their dinner disappeared. As he rolled on, he justified it to himself. Sparing the cute otters and only stealing their food clearly meant he still had some kind of human mercy left. That thought ended abruptly when he spotted a squirrel clutching a nut, its ears and tail tipped with magical flames. The squirrel flared up in rage, its entire body igniting. It flipped into a handstand and launched a fireball from its tail, sending a column of flames straight at him. Fire magic was still a serious weakness, no matter how big he was. Still, the size gap was ridiculous. He loomed over the squirrel, warning it not to blame him since it attacked first. Then he slammed his massive body down, joking that playing with fire in the forest was forbidden. When he lifted himself back up, only a clean skeleton remained. The system confirmed the kill and decomposition, granting more experience. Deeper in the forest, violent crashes echoed. A large, muscular lizard was hurled through the air and slammed into the ground. Standing opposite it was a towering tree monster, a glowing crystal embedded in its chest, branch arms waving aggressively. The lizard pushed itself up, its throat swelling as it prepared a counterattack. It unleashed a powerful stream of liquid from its mouth. Acid sprayed over the tree monster, sizzling violently. The bark and flesh began to melt as the creature writhed in agony. Even as its body melted away, the tree monster wasn't finished. A glowing seed shot out from its collapsing form and landed neatly inside a hollow stump nearby. Drawing power straight from the earth, the stump pulsed with energy and regenerated almost instantly, restoring the tree monster as if nothing had happened. The lizard snarled in frustration when it saw its enemy return. Deciding to end things fast, it activated Wild Rush and charged forward at incredible speed. In response, the tree monster thrust out its branches like spears, trying to stop the assault. The lizard twisted and weaved through the attacks, dodging with impressive agility as it closed the distance. It stepped in, jaws ready to bite, but the tree monster reacted faster. A sharp branch snapped around the lizard's arm, piercing straight through its tough scales. Before it could pull free, strange white buds began sprouting along the branch, rapidly spreading and locking the lizard in place. One of the buds bloomed into a grotesque flower right in front of its face. The lizard stared at it, its eye reflecting the petals. Then the infection hit. Red tumors erupted instantly from the lizard's pupil. In the next moment, its eye exploded in a spray of blood. Blinded, it screamed in agony. The tree monster followed up immediately, slamming its heavy branch into the lizard's body. The impact sent the beast flying, crashing hard into the rocky ground. Despite being battered and blinded, the lizard refused to stay down. It staggered back to its feet and activated thermal vision to compensate for its lost sight. Heat signatures flooded its perception. The tree monster's branches now appeared as glowing streaks. With a powerful leap, it launched itself high into the air. Tucking its body in, it spun rapidly, turning itself into a living drill. Activating Sharp Tail, it used the momentum to deliver a devastating downward strike. The attack tore straight through the tree monster, smashing it apart into splintered wood and green pulp. As the monster's core shattered, the lizard roared in victory, blood and saliva dripping from its jaws. But the win came at a cost. The parasitic flower continued blooming from its ruined eye socket, its roots burrowing deeper into its flesh. The giant slime mold came barreling down the hill without hesitation. It rolled straight over the wounded lizard, crushing it under sheer weight and absorbing it completely. A system alert briefly warned of a foreign object, but his antibodies neutralized it instantly, awarding him experience for the decomposition. He paused for a second, mildly confused by the warning, then shrugged it off. There was no time to think. He needed to eat as much as possible before his time ran out. As he continued flattening everything in his path, something started to feel off. He had rolled across what should have been hundreds of acres, yet the forest around him still looked impossibly dense, like he hadn't reduced it at all. Then the ground shook. Far in the distance, a massive pillar of dark energy erupted from a mountain, shooting straight into the night sky. Huge geometric magical patterns spread across the heavens as the energy pierced the clouds. The slime mold watched in stunned silence. Despite the overwhelming spectacle, there was no sound at all. It felt unreal, like a hallucination. Before he could make sense of it, his time limit hit 0. The system cleared his excess HP. His enormous body dissolved into smoke, shrinking instantly. In seconds, he was back to his original small, spiky form, resting on the grass. He checked his status, level 49. He'd gained the Weak Creature Lord achievement, and his HP had jumped to nearly 3,000. Then another notification popped up and ruined the mood. Nutritional overload was complete. The next requirement was 5 times higher, and he wouldn't gain any experience for the next hour. Lying in the crater his giant body had left behind, He muttered cynically, wondering if his fancy new title just meant he was king of kindergarten monsters. His body churned unpleasantly. Overeating had left him nauseous. Opening his inventory, he found it packed with junk. Rocks, wood, bones, all kinds of useless trash. Knowing he had to clear it out, his body convulsed as he vomited a massive pile of items onto the forest floor. When it was over, he lay there, deflated beside the debris. He felt lighter, but also bored. With XP locked, there wasn't much to do. Then another notification appeared. At level 60, he would be able to choose between a class change or evolution. His excitement exploded. This was the real path to power. He reasoned that mimicry was probably tied to class changes, while evolution sounded like a fundamental upgrade, something like an animal gaining human-level intelligence. His imagination ran wild. He pictured himself as a slime mold mage, mastering magic and ruling the world in this ridiculous form. He laughed to himself, until the sound of wings snapped him back to reality. Looking up, he spotted 3 fast-moving figures flying through the trees. His mood shifted instantly. Armed wasp mages. The same magic-using hornets he'd fought before, and there were 3 of them. Facing that many at once would be dangerous. Curious about their destination, he decided to follow. Leaping from tree to tree, he trailed them at a safe distance as they flew deeper into the forest. When he reached a clearing, he froze in shock. The forest floor was packed with countless hives, all connected by organic bridges, forming an enormous insect city. Hidden in the grass, he stared in awe. The scale was unbelievable. He wondered if this massive interconnected structure was what an evolved swarm looked like. The 3 wasp mages descended into the colony, joining thousands of others. Then the ground trembled. A massive clawed foot slammed down, crushing an entire hive instantly. A colossal bird stepped into view, a snake-tailed terror bird, towering over the ruins. The bird ignored the wasps completely. It ripped open the hives and greedily devoured the larvae inside. Watching from cover, the slime mold broke out in a cold sweat. He recognized the species immediately. The red one had once scared him so badly he'd nearly given up on life, though this blue variant felt different. The colony fought back. Thousands of soldier wasps launched a coordinated dive bomb attack from every direction. But the bird's defenses were absurd. Stingers bounced off its thick feathers. Attacks aimed at the snake head on its tail failed too, unable to pierce the hardened scales. Physical attacks were useless. Switching tactics, the swarm blanketed the bird in insects, trying to suffocate or overheat it. The bird simply shook itself, sending thousands of wasps flying like dust. With brute force failing, the 3 wasp mages finally joined the battle. Hovering above the predator, they activated glowing magic circles and began summoning dozens of fireballs, all aimed directly at the towering terror bird. Explosions tore through the clearing, turning it into a furnace and blasting apart the hives. From his hiding place, Slimy could only stare, stunned by how strong the magic was. He expected the blue bird to be wiped out, but instead, it drank the fire like it was nothing. Its blue feathers burned into a bright, glowing red as it absorbed the spell. Fully charged now, the bird screeched and locked its gaze on the mages. The wasps hesitated, suddenly terrified. With one sharp snap of its snake-like tail, the bird ripped straight through the hives. The snake head scanned the area with heat vision, spotted survivors, and crushed a wasp in seconds. As the swarm collapsed, Slimy realized what had happened. The bird had baited the mages into powering it up. It wasn't just strong, it was clever. He decided to stay hidden and wait until it left so he could scavenge what was left behind. Then everything changed. One of the bird's wings suddenly froze solid. A group of human adventurers had arrived, drawn in by the noise. Nia Ross identified the creature as a snake heron, while Ray Carter warned everyone it was a Lord-level threat. Watching from the rocks, Slimy recognized the group from his past. The bird flexed as heat rolled off its body, melting the ice and breaking free with barely any effort. Ray Carter told Cool Fern to prepare a massive spell while he held the monster back. Cool Fern nodded, his staff lighting up with stored power. The snake heron struck with a massive claw, which Rake blocked with his shield. The impact nearly crushed him, but he forced a shield counter that blasted the bird backward. The rebound shattered his shield, leaving him exposed. The snake tail lunged for his throat, but Nia's boar, little steel back, slammed into it, knocking it off course and giving Rake time to retreat. The bird didn't waste a second. It unleashed all the fire it had absorbed in a massive blast, like a dragon's breath. Cool Fern slammed his staff into the ground, raising a towering wall of ice just in time. The team took cover as fire and ice collided, flattening the surrounding trees. From his hiding spot, Slimy watched in pure terror, realizing just how far out of his league this fight was. The ice barrier started to melt. Cool Fern shouted as he poured in everything he had left, but the wall finally shattered. When the smoke cleared, the ground was scorched, but the humans were still standing. Slimy could only feel miserable about how weak he was compared to them. Exhausted, Cool Fern admitted he was completely out of magic. Rake immediately took control, telling Nia to cover him while he went for the final blow. Little Steelback fired a spread of quills at the bird, distracting it long enough for Rake to release his full power. He launched himself into the air and came crashing down, his mace glowing like a falling meteor. The strike smashed the bird's head into the dirt, crushing its skull in one clean hit. The monster dropped. Rake stood over the body and declared the battle finished. Cool Fern let out a breath, commenting on just how dangerous the creature had been. From the shadows, Slimy decided that sticking close to humans might be his safest option. Rake told Nia to search the bird's memories for clues about their missing boss. But as he stepped near the tail, the red snake head suddenly bit into his shoulder. At the same time, the main head, everyone thought it was destroyed, snapped its eyes open for one last move. Cool Fern reacted instantly, driving an ice spike through the snake head and killing it, shouting a warning about petrifying venom. Nia rushed forward with a potion, but it was already too late. Rake's throat had turned to stone, making it impossible for him to swallow. His body collapsed as his skin hardened into gray rock. Nia broke down beside the statue that had been her leader. Realizing the snake heron was draining Rake's life to heal itself, Cool Fern grabbed her and forced her to run. As they escaped, the snake heron slowly rose again, its wounds sealing shut. It watched them flee, then let out a sound that made it clear who truly ruled the battlefield. Cole gulped down a stamina potion while running, admitting between breaths that he'd misjudged things badly. He said the snake bird wasn't just lord level, it was already on par with a high-tier monster lord. Still, he believed there was hope. If they could make it out of the forest within a week and get the church to send a royal priest, Carter might still be saved. That hope shattered when the snake bird caught up. It slammed down in front of them, cracking the ground on impact. Cole stared in disbelief, muttering that it had regenerated far faster than he expected. He told Nia he'd take command from here. The bird lunged, claws flashing. Nia froze, panic taking over as she asked him what they were supposed to do. Cole told her not to be afraid. He said he'd already thought this through. He ordered her to conserve her magic for now, they needed to escape this cursed forest later. Then he began casting, unleashing an ice Gatling barrage. Frozen bullets hammered the snake bird, locking its legs in place as ice piled up around them. But the monster broke free. Heat built in its throat, it was about to cast high-tier flame magic again, and Cole knew immediately what was coming. He shouted at Nia to ignore everything else and just run. Seeing him walk straight toward the bird, Nia demanded to know what he was doing. Cole answered calmly that he had no choice. If he didn't pin it down here, either of them would escape, and immediately cast high-tier magic, summoning a glacial barrier, a massive wall of ice that rose between them. Nia screamed his name, but the other side of the wall was instantly swallowed by flames. The heat and light tore through the forest, leaving her devastated. Nia clenched her teeth and swung herself back onto Little Steelback's back, urging it forward as she rode away. She knew she had to leave this place immediately, and report everything about this twisted forest to the church. Staying any longer felt dangerous. Just then, her owl caught up to her. Nia felt a rush of relief. She had thought she'd lost it earlier when their magical connection was cut. Seeing it again was a huge comfort. With her owl's vision guiding her, finding a way out of the forest should have been much easier. But that hope shattered almost instantly. The owl didn't respond to her call. Instead, it flew past her and landed silently on a nearby branch. Confused, Nia looked up and froze. When the owl turned around, she saw its eyes bulging unnaturally, filled with something alien. The sanctified fall parasite had infected it. At the same time, far away in a sealed space, another scene was unfolding. Mountains of dead monster bodies were scattered everywhere, weapons still embedded in their flesh. Guild Master Goon stood among them, staring at a system window warning him that his energy and mana had reached their time limit. He already understood what that meant. Suddenly, the dead flesh around him began to move. The corpses flowed together, merging into a single massive body. The entity that formed commented calmly that Goon was panting, clearly struggling to breathe. Over the past 2 years, Goon had exterminated every high-level magic beast in the swamp forest. This entity had died by his hands countless times already. It wondered aloud if Goon had finally used up all his assets. This being was Ko Yalwa, the king of the swamp forest. Ko Yalwa asked what Goon had been muttering to himself about earlier, guessing it was the thing he called the system, the same thing that helped him turn his guild into one of the 8 great guilds. It claimed to know the secret of Goon's body as well, having gathered similar information through transmigration across other universes. It explained that forcing Goon to give everything he had, sparing nothing, was the only way to truly strangle and kill him. That was why Goon had been lured into this trap. Even so, Ko Yalwa admitted it hadn't expected Goon to grow this strong, or to still be hiding so many trump cards. With a cold tone, the entity offered him one last choice. After destroying everything Goon had built, would he prefer to be turned into a corpse puppet? Or would he join them and take part in the grand plan of dimensional ascension? Goon said he'd already made his decision. Picking up his weapon, he answered by slashing forward, declaring he would kill them all. Koyalawa laughed, calling it pointless. Inside this eternal barrier, it was immortal and undying. It asked if Goon really understood that. Another mass of flesh surged up from behind to attack, mocking him for still being nothing more than mortal flesh. His heavy breathing proved he was nearing his limit. If he refused to cooperate, he would die. Goon didn't argue. He calmly took another item from his inventory and threw a vial at Koyalawa. It shattered on impact, spraying true holy water everywhere. The entity recoiled in shock as the holy water spread, burning through its body. Goon explained that true holy water scorched the soul itself. Even physical immortality was meaningless in front of that power. He admitted it was unfortunate. He'd been saving it for the true mastermind behind everything, but it had to be used here. Koyalawa cursed him, ranting that even angels had fallen and demanding to know where he'd obtained true holy water. Before an answer could come, Koyalawa was no more. The holy fire kept raging, swallowing the battlefield in blinding light. Goon stood inside the flames when a system warning suddenly flashed in front of him, alerting him to a massive energy spike. The message made his chest tighten. The target was regenerating. A surge of golden power exploded outward. Instead of the monster burning away, its flesh knitted itself back together, rising higher and more imposing as the chaos settled. Goon stared in disbelief. He knew true holy water didn't just burn the body, it scorched the soul itself. A soul that was completely erased shouldn't be able to come back, even in a sanctified environment. So how was the enemy still standing? As the smoke thinned, the monster revealed its new form. Kidoyawa hovered above the ground in what the system identified as sanctified fall mode, a horrifying floating red sphere, studded with writhing tentacles and a single unblinking eye at its center. The creature laughed, its voice dripping with mockery, making it clear Goon's supposed trump card had failed. Goon demanded to know how it had adapted so quickly. Kidoyawa sounded almost pleased as it explained that the answer lay with Goon himself. It reminded him of the Dragon Emperor's finger he had sliced off earlier. Back then, Kidoyawa had wondered how a spear could cut through a Dragon Emperor's skin. The answer, it realized, was the true holy water coating Goon's weapon. When that finger had fallen into the forest and gone missing, it landed near weaker monsters. That triggered an invisibility-type attribute, allowing the fragment to be located and reclaimed. By absorbing the finger, Kidoyawa learned the secret of the holy water. Since Goon had only used a thin layer on his blade, the monster was able to adapt to the holy energy lingering in the severed limb and gain immunity. Declaring that Goon had exhausted all his options, Kidoyawa calmly ordered him to die. The ground responded instantly. It rumbled and split apart as enormous stone hands erupted from the earth, towering over Goon. One slammed down, aiming to crush him flat. Then another. And another. The attack turned into a brutal barrage as countless hands smashed the ground over and over again, burying him under sheer force. The assault ended with a spell, abyss magic, earth burial, leaving a massive crater beneath the floating monster. Buried deep under the earth, Goon felt crushing pressure from all sides. His spear reacted on its own. The tip glowed as a green magic circle appeared, activating 20 layers of elemental runestone effects. Earth attribute absorption kicked in, neutralizing the weight and magic pressing down on him. The moment the pressure vanished, Goon exploded out of the rubble, launching himself skyward with his weapon blazing. He charged straight at the floating red sphere, activating his spear art, the technique meant to pierce all things. Kidoyawa sneered, pointing out that Goon's equipment had limit. It asked how long he thought he could keep struggling before unleashing necrotic shriek. The air screamed as thousands of red energy beams poured down like a storm. Goon met the attack head-on, his blue aura colliding violently with the flood of necrotic magic. System warnings stacked rapidly in his vision. His weapon's durability was nearly depleted. His magic resistance had dropped below 20%. His body was exhausted. Blood dripped from his mouth, but Goon ignored every warning. He pushed himself further, preparing a high-tier martial art, the 1-inch punch, spiral force. The system urgently warned that using it in his condition would cause irreversible damage. Goon dismissed the risk. To him, the cost no longer mattered. He poured every last bit of energy into the spiral attack. The strain was too much for his gear. The spear's tip shattered mid-strike. Even so, the spiraling force surged forward on its own, slamming into Kidoyawa's center. Red and black energy collided in a massive explosion that shook the battlefield. Without the spear to anchor him, Goon lost momentum and crashed hard into the rocky ground. Blood splattered across the stone as he knelt there, clutching his arm. His body shook uncontrollably. The backlash had completely ruined his left arm. When the smoke cleared, Kidoyawa reformed without a scratch. It mocked him openly, asking why he kept choosing pain instead of simply dying. It guessed Goon was still desperately searching for a way out even now. Goon stayed silent, his head lowered. Regret weighed heavily on him. Saving his skills had been a fatal mistake. He realized too late that he should have used all the true holy water at the very beginning and ended the fight instantly. Then a massive shadow swallowed the battlefield. From the sky, the Dragon Emperor's finger descended like a meteor. As it fell, Kidoyawa declared that Goon never stood a chance. He wasn't fighting a single monster, but the power of the entire Holy Sea itself. The colossal fragment hurtled straight toward the injured knight. Even then, Goon refused to give up. With what little strength he had left, he opened his system inventory. As darkness closed in, he pulled out a tattered ancient scroll glowing with sickly green light. The scroll unfurled on its own, revealing pulsing red runes. It was a forbidden item, the Demon King's favor, and it radiated ominous power. Kettle Yellowa froze as a demon contract materialized before his eyes. He pointed at Goon, his voice shaking as he accused him of hypocrisy, openly opposing their plans while secretly making a deal with a demon long ago. Enormous hands emerged from the darkness, belonging to the Demon King himself. Without hesitation or mercy, the skill Oblivion's grasp activated. Kettle Yellowa was crushed instantly, his body collapsing into fine dust that scattered into the air like ash. From within the shadows, a demon stepped forward and greeted Goon casually, remarking that it had been a long time. He looked Goon over and burst out laughing, calling his current state pathetic, just like back when the Demon King had first failed to descend into this universe. The demon sounded almost nostalgic, saying the moment brought back fond memories, and that he'd never forget Goon's so-called kindness. As a reward, he offered to lend Goon his power, claiming it would be more than enough to wipe out those so-called righteous scoundrels. He even directly called Goon a transmigrator, confident that the temptation would be impossible to resist. To his surprise, Goon didn't hesitate. He calmly tore the demon contract into pieces and said they were even now. The Demon King frowned, clearly disappointed. He called Goon heartless, annoyed that he hadn't fallen for the trap. Before vanishing back into the void, he left Goon with one final warning, that he had already seen the face of his death. Once the demon disappeared, the swamp fell silent again. Goon opened his system interface and winced. His HP was nearly gone, and his mana was completely empty. The system warned him that the monolone skill was still draining HP to repay its debt and urged him to replenish immediately. He didn't have the strength to respond. Goon sank down onto the ground, exhausted. He wondered if the summoning of the Hope coordinate had worked and asked the system to establish a connection. The answer came back quickly: connection failed. At the same time, a yellow system message appeared from Slimy. Decomposition had failed because the target wasn't organic matter. Slimy stared at Carter's body, now fully turned to stone. He shrugged it off, hopped down from the statue, and picked up Carter's mace. Since Carter clearly didn't need it anymore, Slimy figured it was fair game. Getting no response, he took the silence as permission and happily bounced away with his new equipment. As he moved through the forest, Slimy thought that if he helped the humans when they were in trouble, maybe they'd let him tag along back to their towns. But then he ran straight into a massive ice wall, one Cole had created earlier. Slimy immediately recognized it as magic. A mage had made this, no doubt about it, which meant the group had to be close. He wondered if they'd already taken down the snake bird. Maybe there was loot left behind. Still, he wasn't stupid. His own survival came first. Instead of rushing in, he decided to scout things out. Activating his search skill, Slimy carefully stretched his tendrils upward. The moment they peeked over the ice wall, his whole body went rigid. The snake bird was still alive. Worse, it was holding Cole. Cole's body was burned beyond recognition, his skin completely gone as if it had been peeled away by fire. Slimy didn't even have time to react before the snake bird casually opened its beak and swallowed Cole whole, like it was nothing more than another meal. That was enough. Slimy didn't hesitate. He turned and bolted. As Slimy ran, one terrifying thought kept repeating in his mind. If Cole was dead, then what about the last girl? Had she already been killed too? Elsewhere in the forest, Sanctified Fall, now fully possessing the owl Mio, dove from above with lethal speed, targeting Nia. Nia reacted instantly, warning little Steelback that Mio was no longer an ally. Her voice was calm but firm as she ordered a counterattack. Steelback responded at once, activating spiny back. Its fur stiffened and extended outward like rows of sharp nails, bracing for impact. But Myo was ready. As the owl charged, its beak began to glow. Iron Beak Gale activated, its neck stretching unnaturally as slicing force exploded outward in every direction. Trees were shredded in an instant. Trunks split apart, branches collapsed, and the forest itself seemed to be carved open. The sheer force drove Nia and Steelback backward as the attack tore through everything nearby, sending countless trees crashing to the ground. When the destruction finally settled, the forest lay in ruins. And yet, Nia was untouched. She sat calmly among the fallen trees. She sat on the ground amid the ruins, her body trembling. Panic crept into her voice as she cried out for help, her eyes darting across the devastation. She couldn't understand how Myo had ended up like this, how things had spiraled so badly. A harsh, strained grunting sound broke through the silence. Nia turned her head and spotted a spiky-haired boar pinned beneath a massive fallen log. It was Steelback. Forcing herself to stay calm, she called out to him, telling him not to be afraid. She explained that she would try to send her magic power into him and fix this somehow. The boar could only answer with weak, pained grunts. Above them, perched on a tree branch, Myo watched. 3 ghostly heads shaking, glowing faintly as its wings remained half spread. Without warning, the owl creature launched itself forward, wings fully spread as it attacked. Nia barely had time to react. She shrank back against the ground, raising her arms over her face, bracing herself for the impact she was sure was coming. At that exact moment, a skill activated. Mind control. The owl froze mid-motion. Its body stiffened, its expression twisting as its eyes flared with an unnatural glow. Suddenly, the world around Nia dissolved. She found herself floating in a dark, dreamlike space. Almost immediately, she understood where she was. This was Myo's mental world, just as the pet contract allowed. A faint sensation tugged at her awareness. She turned and noticed a distant light ahead. As she focused on it, the shape sharpened. A radiant, angel-like figure hovered in the distance, shining brilliantly, with the owl creature lingering nearby. When Nia finally faced the figure directly, its overwhelming glow flooded her vision, leaving her unable to look away. Nia stood in the strange, glowing mental world, staring up at the radiant figure hovering above her. She quickly realized who it was and wondered why Lord Angel was inside Myo's mind at all. Lord Angel looked down at her calmly and told her to come closer, the voice steady and commanding. Then, without warning, the left side of that serene face twisted, shifting into something red and monstrous. The gentle presence vanished in an instant. Back in her physical body, Nia screamed, panic taking over as she begged desperately for someone, anyone, to save her. Nearby, Steelback trembled under the log, letting out a weak, pained sound as if sensing her terror. At the same moment, the owl creature, its eyes glowing wildly, lunged straight toward Nia. Before it could reach her, a spiked club crashed down onto the owl's head midair. The impact was brutal, sending the creature flying backward and clearing it from the fight in an instant. Nia remained collapsed on the ground, eyes squeezed shut, completely unaware of what had just saved her. When Nia finally opened her eyes, she froze. Right in front of her, it was Captain Hawk's slime meteor hammer. Slimy swung the massive flail with growing confidence, convinced its control over its own body had finally reached perfection. In its mind, a stone was no different from a bullet, and the flail itself was basically a cannon. That confidence lasted exactly one swing too long. The weapon came down with a loud crack, straight onto Steelback's head. Slimy froze. A bead of cold sweat formed as it realized what it had just done. Awkwardly, it pulled the flail back, its body squirming as the weapon dissolved and melted back into its form. Steelback shook his head and let out a low grunt, looking more annoyed than injured. Nia slowly pushed herself upright and turned toward Slimy. Relief flooded her face as she thanked it for saving them. She gently lifted Slimy into her hands and held it close. Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke softly, saying it felt strangely familiar. Like, deep down, she already knew exactly who it was. The slime went completely still, its round body stiffening in pure shock. Inside its head, it instantly rejected the idea. That couldn't be true. It was just a slime. Nothing more, nothing special. Nia didn't see it that way at all. Tears poured down her face as she hugged the slime tightly and pressed it to her cheek. Between sobs, she insisted she knew the truth. To her, this wasn't just a slime. It was Captain Hawk, reborn and returned at the exact moment she needed saving. Behind her, Steelback stood frozen, staring at the scene in disbelief. The boar let out a quiet, breathy huff, clearly struggling to wrap his head around what he was witnessing. From the nearby shadows, a pair of bird-like legs slowly emerged. A moment later, the wounded owl creature dragged itself out from behind a fallen log. Even in its battered state, it let out a sharp, furious screech. Nia stiffened, still clutching the slime, and quickly looked back at Steelback. She asked if he could still fight after receiving her magic. He answered immediately, making it clear he was ready. The slime didn't hesitate. Its body softened and spread, thin tendrils flowing across the ground as it activated its search skill. The owl creature dove down, pecking wildly at the slime's tendrils and tearing into the sensory net. But before it could do real damage, the slime suddenly reformed behind it. A solid club slammed straight into the owl's rear. The owl shrieked in pain and fury, twisting around and lunging at the slime in retaliation. That was when Steelback charged. Perfectly seizing the opening, the boar drove his tusks into the owl's side with brutal force. He didn't slow down. The momentum carried him straight through, his tusks piercing clean through the owl creature's body. At the same time, the slime swung its club with everything it had. The name of the attack rang out clearly: plasmatic cannon. The impact was violent. The club, hurled by the force of the blast, shot past the remains and buried itself deep into a nearby tree. The slime's arm trembled as it reached out and tried to pull the weapon free. As it struggled, a single thought crossed its mind: it had definitely used way too much force this time. Nia stood quietly, watching as the slime finally pulled its weapon free from the tree. As the moment lingered, her thoughts drifted back to Myo, the worry she had carried bubbling up again. She crouched down, studying the slime more closely. Then it clicked. This was the same tiny creature she had met by the campfire earlier that night. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became. It was also the same presence she had sensed earlier through Myo's reconnaissance. Slowly, Nia reached out and lifted the slime gently. Half joking, half serious, she asked if it had been following her all this time out of some special fondness. Cradled in her hands, the slime stiffened in surprise. A single thought flashed through its mind: could this finally be it? A golden magic circle appeared on the ground beneath them, glowing softly, the words, "Pet Pact," shimmering within it. Nia looked directly at the slime and asked if it was willing to form a pact with her. Her expression was calm, sincere, and filled with promise. She swore she would take good care of it. Before the slime could answer, a bright yellow system window abruptly appeared, flashing a warning. It stated clearly that if the host entered a servant pact with a human, access to the system would be lost forever. He would have to choose one, either the system or a master, and there would be no second chance. He started weighing it out. The system was useful, powerful even. It helped him grow, survive, and made everything more convenient. Still, it felt dull compared to the kind of heroine you'd see in an old-school, hot-blooded shonen story. When he really thought about it, the decision felt almost too easy. Numbers, pop-up windows, and emotionless prompts couldn't compare to a real person standing right in front of him. His thoughts ran ahead on their own. He pictured himself and Nia training together under clear skies, running along bright beaches with waves crashing nearby. In his mind, they faced trial after trial, growing stronger together like perfect partners straight out of a very familiar monster-collecting game. In that imagined future, he wasn't just tagging along. He was her monster, fighting for her, trusting her without hesitation. They kept climbing higher, dungeon after dungeon, battle after battle. Nia pushed herself hard and Slimy kept pace, evolving alongside her through every struggle and win. Eventually, she became a champion-level master, her name spreading across nations. Monster taming exploded in popularity, and she rose as the strongest rookie adventurer, gaining fans everywhere she went. People talked about her with admiration wherever she showed up. In that version of the future, Slimy even imagined merging with her, becoming her most powerful and stylish gear, something no one else could copy. With his slime-shaping abilities, he continued evolving until he finally turned into a handsome man, able to stand beside her as an equal. Together, they defeated the great demon king, brought an end to the age of darkness, and restored peace. After that, they got married, settled down, had tons of kids, and lived a quiet life with Steelback always nearby. To Slimy, stories built around systems already felt worn out. If he really had to choose, picking a beautiful girl as his master felt like the obvious answer. In fact, he'd already mapped out hundreds of episodes in his head, dramatic arcs, emotional reunions, and legendary final battles included. He was ready. He decided to choose Nia over the system. Just as he was about to accept the contract, everything went wrong. Nia was killed in an instant. Her body collapsed beside him, her arms still wrapped around Slimy. For a brief moment, nothing made sense. His thoughts broke apart all at once, and little Steelback stood beside him, unable. The one responsible was the corpse of Myo. It stood there calmly, having used abyss magic, Circle of Wind's demise. From the ruined neck, something disturbing happened as a new head began forming. The shape was human-like, but stripped of skin, exposing raw flesh underneath. Little Steelback reacted immediately. Fueled by rage, he charged straight at the monster. Slimy shouted for him to stop, pleading with him not to rush in. He still couldn't understand how the head Steelback had destroyed earlier was already growing back like nothing had happened. Before Steelback could get close, the creature lifted a finger and pointed at him, casting another spell. Using abyss magic, atavistic ray, it forcibly altered Steelback's body, reducing him into a small lizard before tossing him aside. The terrified lizard scrambled away into the forest. Slimy stayed where he was. This thing was no longer just an owl. It now had the terrifying power to force devolution. It now had a frightening new power, the ability to force devolution. The human-shaped head finished forming and shifted into an annoyed look, muttering about how everything had turned into a hassle. It scoffed at Ko Yalawa, calling him useless and mocking him for burning through resources while still failing to deal with something so small. The voice didn't stop there, throwing jabs at the old man from the Holy See too, saying none of this would have happened if they'd listened from the start. The one speaking finally revealed herself. She was Merlin, Guild Master of the Blue Hat Guild, and one of the church's 7 holy knights. Clearly irritated that she had to handle this herself, Merlin glanced at the sky and noticed the imprisonment barrier was already gone. Even so, she had no intention of chasing anyone down. Activating Tempest Wing, she shot upward at extreme speed and disappeared from view. Slimy was left behind, standing next to Nia's lifeless body. Bit by bit, the truth settled in. Another human had used magic to move their consciousness into the owl's corpse, and because he was too weak, he hadn't even been worth acknowledging. That feeling hit him hard. It was exactly the same as when he first arrived in this world. Everything had happened too fast. There hadn't been time to process any of it. Merlin had killed the master he was about to choose, which meant the contract never went through. He briefly wondered if he should feel lucky for surviving, but the thought didn't last. Nia was gone and he was still here, worrying about staying alive. Until he personally killed that monster, he decided he had no right to call himself a man. Anger burned through him. Slimy swore he would crush the enemy's head with his own cytoplasm and took off through the forest, chasing after his target. Elsewhere in the swamp, Goon's system informed him that the Monolon repayment was complete. It immediately followed up with warnings about his condition. His health was down to 789 out of 2.8 million, and his arm was badly damaged and needed treatment right away. Goon told the system to stop pointing out the obvious. He had nothing left to give. He ordered it to keep trying to contact the transmigrator summoned by the Hope coordinate. The system replied that long-distance communication wouldn't work until the initial connection was fully established and advised him to keep moving to find a stronger signal. Goon already knew the Holy See would send reinforcements. If they showed up, escape wouldn't be an option. He needed to find the new transmigrator and get out of the swamp immediately. As he moved through the forest, he suddenly stepped on something slimy and yellow. At the same time, Slimy's search skill finally locked onto a target. Thinking he'd found the long-necked monster, Slimy attacked without hesitation, swinging his mace at full force and smashing it straight into Goon's head. The impact felt wrong. There was resistance, like hitting armor. The shape of the target didn't feel right either. When the figure collapsed, Slimy realized his mistake. This wasn't the monster. He'd mistaken Goon for part of it because of the tassels on his helmet. Slimy apologized quickly, blaming the poor lighting and grumbling about how the flashy helmet made things hard to see. Before he could explain any further, Goon grabbed him. Recognizing Hawk's weapon and catching the scent of Nia's blood on Slimy, Goon accused him of killing his guild members, assuming he was connected to the church. At that exact moment, both of their system windows appeared at the same time, announcing that the connection had been successfully established. Goon immediately understood that Slimy was a transmigrator, and as Slimy stared at Goon's system window, he finally realized he wasn't the only transmigrator in this world. Goon stops mid-action, staring at the screens in shock. He asks if Slimy also has a system, quickly realizing this creature is a transmigrator. Slimy is just as stunned, learning that Goon is also from another world. Goon explains that in his fight against the church, he activated a noble phantasm called Hope Coordinate to summon an ally. Slimy now understands that his arrival wasn't random at all. Goon admits he was too weak to save Nia even after meeting the guild and asks Slimy if he's willing to help. He reassures him that he also started with nothing after transmigrating and survived by relying on the system, adding that this world shows no kindness to anyone. Goon then removes his helmet, revealing he isn't human and that he hides his face for a reason. Curious, Slimy asks what race he belongs to. Goon admits he's a goblin, one of the most hated races. Expecting something completely different, Slimy comments that he'd rather remain a cute slime than look like an ugly green monster. Goon reveals his face instead, refined and elf-like. He casually mentions that his appearance causes problems, just not the kind Slimy imagined. Slimy complains it's unfair for a goblin to look that good, but Goon brushes it off, pointing out that humans would chase him anywhere, while a slime's small body is perfect for moving unnoticed. As Slimy keeps grumbling about appearances, Goon rises, supporting his injured arm. He mentions that he founded the guild to unite different races, then warns that the church has sent a ruthless knight named Merlin, the guild master of the Blue Hat Guild. When Slimy asks what they should do next, Goon reaches out his hand. A system interface appears as he prepares to transfer all his magic and combat abilities. The system confirms the link, and Slimy excitedly asks if this will instantly make him overwhelmingly powerful. Goon explains that he walked straight into a trap set by the Pope, with the old man from the Holy See pulling the strings, and has already exhausted his strength. He needs Slimy to be the one who continues the fight. When Slimy jokes that this sounds like a typical hatred of the church, Goon corrects him. He explains that the church already controls the world, and their true goal is to sacrifice all life here to fuel beings who want to ascend to a higher universe. Stunned by the scale of it all, Slimy asks how something like that is even possible. Goon begins recounting his past. He explains that he was born a goblin cub at the very bottom of society, raised in mines where survival meant eating scraps and whatever was left behind. At 5 years old, his system awakened, giving him the power to kill the goblins who tormented him. In his memories, a blood-covered young Goon questions who he really is, yet knows his soul was always human. He goes on to explain that he rescued imprisoned female heroes and helped them recover using a skill called dual cultivation. Slimy agrees that even with a monster body, Goon's heart is human. Then it clicks what that skill really means, and Slimy awkwardly points out that it involves sex, comparing it to his own useless decomposition ability. Goon confirms it without hesitation, admitting the skill is exhausting and even saying he envies Slimy. He explains that partnering with different classes boosted different stats, warriors strengthened his vitality, mages increased his magic output, and the experience gain was massive. He used that power to protect them and start families. Wanting a safer future, he moved them all to the royal capital. Hearing this, Slimy explodes with jealousy, accusing Goon of bragging about his love life. The tone shifts instantly. Goon's voice breaks as he says moving to the capital was a fatal mistake that cost him his wives and child. A heavy presence interrupts the transfer at 12%. Merlin arrives, now inhabiting a massive bird-like body, announcing that he's finally found Goon. Goon senses the danger immediately. He shoves Slimy out of harm's way and dodges unseen slashes tearing through the space around him. Merlin follows up by casting Abyss Magic, Circle of Wind's demise, forming a giant tornado that rips through the forest. When the destruction settles, Merlin stands calmly in the center of a crater. He taunts Goon, openly stating he knows he's a goblin and wants to capture him for experiments. Ignoring orders to kill him, Merlin mockingly brings up Ko Yalawa, asking how Goon managed to defeat an undying monster. Goon pulls himself from the wreckage as his system warns that his armor is destroyed and suggests retreat. He shuts the warning down. Merlin notices him speaking to an unseen interface and jokes about claiming the system for himself once he steals Goon's body. Bleeding, Goon realizes Merlin is a devil and that the undying monster was the result of twisted experiments. Merlin scoffs, saying human lives mean nothing. Suddenly, slime-coated rocks fly toward him. Merlin catches them without effort, barely glancing over. Slimy trembles in the distance as Merlin looks at him with mild pity and uses a gaze that locks Slimy in place, making him feel examined inside and out. Merlin then notices something off. Realizing he was fooled by a decoy, he spots Goon retreating and sighs, wondering where he thinks he can escape. That's when Goon drops from above, launching a counterattack with physical arts, Weak Point Break. Merlin responds instantly, casting Geometric Inferno and trapping Goon inside a massive cube of fire. Watching the flames, Slimy cries, convinced this is the end for his ally. Merlin smiles, acknowledging the risk but confident the outcome won't change. Then Goon punches straight through the fire. His technique works even against magic, shattering the spell. Merlin stares as Goon's hand bursts through the flames and grabs him. Goon locks his grip on the mage and declares that he finally has him. Surrounded by fire, Goon states that even if this kills him, he will make sure Merlin goes down with him. The system screen flashed showing that only 1 point of health remained out of an absurdly high total. A notice explained that the desperate struggle state had kicked in for 1 minute, locking HP at 1 no matter what damage came in. Nearby, Goon spoke under his breath, activating a skill called the Final Accord. Merlin reacted instantly. His face twisted unnaturally, sharp teeth showing as a voice burst out of him, shouting at Goon to stop and demanding whether he even understood the cost of using that skill. Another system window appeared, this time with urgent warnings. It explained that the Final Accord would cancel out desperate struggle, drop the host's HP straight to 0, and completely erase both body and soul. The system urged careful consideration. Goon didn't hesitate. Holding Merlin down at the center of the ground, he triggered the spell anyway. A huge green and yellow magic circle flared to life beneath them, flooding the area with violent energy. He simply said that it didn't matter. Merlin screamed as power was ripped out of him, white light tearing away from his eyes and mouth while the sound of extraction echoed again and again. Amid the chaos, Goon looked calm. Surrounded by swirling energy, he sent a final system message to Slimy. He apologized, explaining that this was the only way left to get rid of Merlin. He told Slimy that saving the world was now their responsibility and warned them never to put trust in the church. Slimy stared up, eyes wet, overwhelmed. They begged Goon not to do this and asked how someone like them, a simple slime, was supposed to save the world when even someone as strong as Goon couldn't. Goon's body started breaking apart into glowing particles. His voice reached Slimy one last time, telling them to believe in themselves and revealing that his role had always been to serve as the one who summoned Slimy into this world. The magic circle exploded in a blinding flash. When the light faded, the circle was gone, replaced by frozen runes etched into stone. From beneath a cracked layer of ice, Slimy could be seen on the surface. The surroundings had changed completely. The land was now a barren stretch of broken rock, with steam drifting up from the ground. Slimy looked down, crying softly, and said Goon's name. High above, Merlin was still in the sky. From below, Slimy watched as Merlin shouted curses toward Goon, raging that the entire mission had ended in failure. In a pitch-black void, rows of identical, faceless female candles stood in silence. Only one on the far left still burned with a bright flame, while all the others had gone dark. Up in the sky, Merlin hovered in a ruined state. Her body looked worn down and unstable as she spoke about the situation. She said that 5 life candles, which were meant to link her to the chaotic universe, had already gone out. She added bitterly that the only vessel left for her descent had been the remains of a weak, fallen holy monster. Before she could go on, a massive jet of yellow slime shot upward and smacked straight into her face. Slimy pulled back, spitting and staring her down. A system notice popped up showing HP -50. Slimy told her to stop talking nonsense, saying he was going to carry on Goon's will and settle an old score tied to a girl from earlier. As part of Slimy's body sank into the ground, he made a quick decision. He left a clone behind as insurance, planning to shift his awareness to it if things turned bad. In the next moment, Slimy launched himself onto Merlin's face, spreading over one of her eyes. Merlin reacted in confusion, questioning whether this slime was some leftover contract monster Goon had prepared. Anger quickly took over her expression. She declared that Slimy would replace Goon and receive all of her fury instead. Colored rings of light swept through Slimy as an attack activated. The system identified it as abyssal magic, devolution ray. When nothing happened, a large question mark appeared above Slimy. Merlin stared at the result and demanded to know why there was no effect. Internally, she considered that her heavily damaged soul might have weakened her magic far more than expected. Energy whipped violently around her as she shouted that this couldn't be forgiven. She claimed that as the kingdom's strongest magician, there was no way she should struggle against a single low-level monster. In her outburst, a small chunk of Slimy was thrown aside. Slimy spread countless slimy tendrils outward, quietly searching for the right skill. He judged that Goon had already left Merlin barely holding on, and more importantly, she had no idea about his hidden option. Slimy decided to take advantage of that gap and strike without warning. Out of nowhere, a snake-like bird slammed into Merlin, sending her flying backward. She crashed hard against an unseen surface, her body bursting apart on impact as blood scattered through the air. Merlin's damaged body, followed by her battered and bleeding face. She spat out curses, muttering about what kind of thing she was dealing with now. She swore that if she ever made it back to the church and had time to recover, she would turn the entire swamp forest into nothing but ruins. Nearby, the snake bird began to glow with a strong light. The snake bird leaned forward, gathering power as the system announced Pseudo-Dragon's Breath. The snake bird followed up by sweeping a broad stream of fire across the stone ground. From a distance, Slimy watched with its tendrils spread wide. The snake bird tilted its head, staring down at the pool of lava it had just formed. Merlin's cries echoed from within the molten heat. Then, without hesitation, the snake bird began absorbing the lava, drawing it back into its body. Slimy stared on, unable to look away. Along the snake bird's furry side, its body started swelling and pulsing, as if something inside was forcing its way out. A pink, serpent-like head pushed through the snake bird's back, a forked tongue flicking into the air. A bright white glow wrapped around the snake bird, outlining its form as the change completed. Slimy watched as the shadow of the transformed snake bird stretched larger and heavier, realizing mid-thought that it was evolving. The full result came into view, a two-headed snake-bird chimera. The original head looked longer and sharper now, while a pink serpent head with a long neck rose from its back, paired with an extended tail. With a powerful beat of its wings, the newly evolved snake-bird lifted off, flying high into the sky and leaving the lava field and Slimy behind. Slimy looked up, completely at a loss, struggling to form words as the snake-bird disappeared above. System screens kept popping up one after another, and Slimy was basically catching L's non-stop. Skill transfer stalled at 37% before the connection just dipped. Super magic? Didn't stick. Elemental resistance? Nope. Divine arts, unions, dimensional boosts, each one bounced back with the same excuse. No magic power or the body just wasn't built for it. The only W in the whole mess was martial arts talent sliding through successfully. And after that, Slimy ended up sprawled on the ground. From the outside, Slimy looked like a mess, but inside, the vibe was worse. He admitted to himself that life as a clueless little slime mold had honestly been way more chill. Even with all these new gains, happiness just wasn't there. Slimy activated search, and scattered remains nearby responded. Pieces of Goon's body started pulling together bit by bit, drawn in under Slimy's tentacles. New notifications rolled in. Forging skill unlocked. Medical knowledge unlocked. Cooking skill unlocked. The encyclopedia and map atlas partially filled in. That helped. A little. Slimy started shaping himself into something more human. It took effort, but once the form held, his mindset shifted. He reminded himself that slacking off wasn't an option. He told himself he had to carry on Brother Goon's legacy, because if the church really went through with sacrificing the world, nobody was making it out. He kept reinforcing the shape, filling it in, sticking everything together. The result wasn't perfect, but it was close enough. Slimy figured that even without a real body, controlling it like this should work. Then he tried moving. The moment he put weight on it, the whole thing got shaky. Standing turned into a struggle, and one wrong adjustment sent everything out of sync. He tried correcting himself, but the coordination was a nightmare. Focus on one side, lose the other. Manage the top half, lose control of the legs. The structure gave out, and the human form collapsed back into a blob. Slimy decided to call it for now. Hiding felt smarter, especially since there was no guarantee the church wouldn't send people again. He stored what he could into his slime mold space. Among the items was a piece of armor. The appraisal system explained it was forged from Lockforce stone, built to soak up most physical damage, and reinforced by Goon himself. Later, Slimy slid through the forest as a blob, processing everything that had gone down in a single night. His headspace felt overloaded, so he pulled up the encyclopedia and map atlas to sort things out. The map filled in polar ice fields, the royal capital, deep valleys, mountains, barren mines. Seeing it all laid out made one thing clear. This world was huge. More system info followed. Portals were set up by the royal capital in different regions, letting people travel back and forth. The church ran all of it. Adventurers had to apply through them, and anything gathered on trips got taxed hard. Half of it went straight to the church. The system confirmed Slimy's current location, the swamp forest. Slimy immediately caught onto the idea that finding a portal could mean a direct trip to the royal capital. The route was obvious now. Still, he knew rushing in weak wasn't smart. Right now, his only real backup plan was a piece of busted high-level gear and whatever resources he could scrape together. Then his attention shifted to the body nearby, the girl named Nia. Slimy stared at it for a moment, quietly weighing whether breaking it down was the next move. Slimy hovered over Nia's body for a moment, quietly settling the choice in his head. He figured that keeping her around wouldn't change anything. There was no bringing her back. Letting her sit there and slowly decay felt worse, so he decided this was the cleaner ending. The body started to shift, dissolving smoothly into slime and blending in with him. As it finished, a voice echoed like a soft send-off, saying goodbye to the little slime. After that, Slimy locked in. He told himself that from this point on, even if all that was left of him was a chunk of slime mold, he'd personally see the end of that church. No shortcuts, no backing out. The system wrapped things up fast. Decomposition confirmed. Experience shot up, pushing him from level 49 to 50. He picked up a small batch of enhancement points, and a new skill, Domination, came online. Almost instantly, it synced with his natural traits and fused with Central Command, leveling up into something new, Parasitic Domination. Time passed quietly as Slimy rested in the forest, until movement snapped his attention back. A frog hopped nearby, croaking loud enough to trip his danger sense. Slimy didn't hesitate. He launched a plasmodial barrage, and the frog went down right away. The system logged the win, experience gained, and a bit of HP lost in the process. Standing over the frog, Slimy casually apologized, saying he needed a test subject for the new skill. No hard feelings. The system broke the ability down in detail. Parasitism meant sending slime clusters into the target's body and overriding its neural network. Domination meant full control afterward, turning the body into a shared-sense puppet that followed command. Slimy noted that ever since syncing Brother Gon's encyclopedia data, the system explanations had gotten way more specific. Honestly, it made things easier. First, invade the corpse with slime mold. Simple enough. He activated the skill, and slime poured into the frog's body. Inside, it spread fast, wrapping around everything until the whole thing was covered. A second later, the frog twitched. The system confirmed success. One swamp frog corpse puppet acquired. It also flagged that Slimy had hit the current control limit and would need to level the skill up to manage more. Watching the frog move on its own, Slimy realized parasitism handled the basic motion automatically. The next step was domination. He focused, getting ready to shift his awareness into the slime cluster inside the body and take full control. Slimy realized that his consciousness had really transferred into a corpse. A system window appeared beside what used to be a swamp frog. System, corpse puppet, swamp frog. Durability, 0%. Available skills, charged strike, tongue fist, pounce bite. Slimy noted that there was even a species introduction. He found it interesting, then focused on the durability. He reminded himself that since it was already a corpse, having 0 durability made sense. There was no HP to talk about. From the frog's low point of view, the forest looked massive. Slimy observed that the field of vision was incredibly wide and figured this must be how a swamp frog saw the world. He found it strangely magical. Looking at the frog's hands, he realized that because he had invaded all the nerves, he had inherited the muscle memory too. He commented to himself that it felt exactly like using his own body, with no need to adjust. Then he considered something else. He realized that after turning a body into a puppet, his main slime body would switch into automatic mode. He admitted that sounded a little risky. Thinking about actual combat, Slimy told himself he would need to stay hidden first, then make a move. A moment later, he dropped the serious thoughts. For now, he decided he just wanted to try driving this new body. The frog's tongue shot out. System, tongue fist. The frog started hopping around, croaking repeatedly. Slimy found it incredibly entertaining. He noted that it was fun and decided to explore somewhere else. The frog moved through the forest and spotted a snail. It called out for the little snail not to run and immediately lunged forward. Right after that, the system began to glitch. Signal weak, disconnected. Back in his slime body, Slimy estimated the distance to be about 30 meters. He realized that when controlling a parasitic puppet, he couldn't move too far away from the main body. The frog continued croaking and attacking with its tongue even without his direct control. From his slime body, Slimy finally understood what was happening. He concluded that it wasn't coming back to life. He worked out that the main body functioned like a signal transmission station. When he actively controlled the puppet and moved too far away, the connection would drop because the signal became weak. On the other hand, when the puppet stayed close to the main body, the parasitic corpse would enter automatic mode and act based on its instincts from when it was alive. The frog lashed out again and missed. Watching this, Slimy commented that the automatic mode did not seem very smart. Slimy decided not to overthink it. He recalled the frog puppet and stored it back into his storage space. Thought, forget it. Let's call it back first. A system window popped up. System, parasitic puppet, swamp frog X1. Slimy then started thinking about the snake bird he had encountered earlier. Following that logic, he figured that as long as he defeated that creature, he should be able to parasitize its corpse too. His imagination ran wild. He pictured himself riding a powerful snake bird through the skies. If he could parasitize a high-level magic beast, that would be amazing. He reasoned that he could build a strong parasitic army and use it to fight against the so-called evil Holy See. The idea amused him. For now, he decided to keep searching for better targets. Slimy hopped across the swamp, moving smoothly over the surface. Without warning, a jet of water shot up from below and slammed into him. System, HP -70. Slimy landed back down, annoyed. He demanded to know who dared to launch a sneak attack on him. A strange creature surfaced nearby. It looked like a mix between a pufferfish and a crab. Slimy ordered it to state its name. The creature only responded with strange noises, repeating dulu dulu as it faced him. Slimy sized it up. He identified it as some kind of pufferfish that could spit water, mixed with a smelly crab. To him, it looked like perfect material delivering itself right to his door, saving him the trouble of hunting. The creature attacked again. System, water gun. Slimy complained that everything and everyone seemed to treat him like easy prey. Then he declared that he would show it the strength of a level 50 low-ranking monster lord. Slimy launched his counterattack. System, plasmodial barrage. The barrage struck the puffer crab directly. The creature quickly turned and tried to swim away. Slimy refused to let it escape. He pointed out that attacking and running away would not be that simple. He activated another skill, Morph Net. A shifting net spread out and trapped the fleeing puffer crab in place. Slimy tightened the morph net, and more pufferfish got caught in the struggle. System: defeated target gained experience points. Slimy was impressed. He noted that there were way more of them than he expected. When he checked his interface, a new icon appeared. System: parasitic puppet, pufferfish X1. Another window opened. System: corpse puppet, pufferfish. Durability: 99%. Available skills: water gun, steel tooth cut, inflate. Slimy observed that this one was in much better condition than the frog. 99% durability looked promising. Not far away, a large swamp crab moved beneath a tree. Slimy climbed up, positioning himself above it. Without hesitation, he dropped down and launched plasmodial barrage from above, striking the crab directly. He landed on top of the creature as it struggled beneath him, its legs thrashing. As it tried to shake him off, Slimy slipped between the gaps in its shell. He commented that if it wanted to throw him off, it should first deal with him drilling through the openings in its carapace. He squeezed inside. System: defeated target gained experience points. Once the crab's resistance stopped, Slimy activated his skill. System: Dominion. The takeover completed smoothly. A new icon appeared. System: parasitic puppet, swamp crab X1. Another status window opened. Corpse puppet, swamp crab. Durability: 99%. Available skills: water gun, mud foam, clamp. Slimy reviewed the crab's skills with interest. Between the frog, the pufferfish, and now the swamp crab, his parasitic lineup was steadily expanding. Slimy looked over his combat squad and decided the lineup was finally perfect. Everything felt balanced now. There was Xieju, the heavily armored crab who handled the front line as the team's tank. Xiaoduan, the sharp-eyed pufferfish, stayed back with a bow and arrows, acting as the marksman. Master B, a multi-armed humanoid bee, covered magic attacks as the mage. And Waji, the hooded frog, kept to the shadows as their assassin. Slimy introduced himself as the commander-in-chief and the strongest support, making it clear he was the one holding everything together. The squad loaded into a pixel-style battle interface, facing the level boss, the feathered serpent dragon. The fight kicked off fast. The dragon rushed forward and aimed a trample attack straight at Master B. Slimy immediately called out for Xieju to activate carapace defense. He told him to block it. A massive clawed foot dropped from above, but Xieju jumped in front and raised a glowing shield just in time to take the hit. The stomp came down hard. Cracks spread across Xieju's shell. A system alert popped up, reporting that carapace defense had been used up and his HP was now dropping. Slimy told Xieju not to worry because he had him covered. Then he activated cytoplasmic injection. A stream of glowing fluid sprayed onto the cracked shell. Green healing symbols flashed, and the broken carapace repaired itself almost instantly. Spotting a chance to push back, Slimy pointed at the dragon and told the mage and marksman to go all out. Master B and Xiaoduan responded together. Magic blasts and arrows poured down in a steady wave. Damage numbers: 187, 199, 167, 231, 127, 233, kept popping up as the feathered serpent dragon took hit after hit. Even so, Slimy observed that the dragon's hide was incredibly tough. He noted that the pinning attacks from Master B and Xiaoduan would only slow it down for so long. So he called Waji in to finish the setup. Waji moved fast and used assassination art, landing a precise slash across the dragon's face. Another system alert confirmed that the feathered serpent dragon had taken massive damage and entered a weakened state. Its HP bar dropped to nearly nothing. The squad gathered around Slimy, buzzing and cheering after the successful combo. But Slimy told them this wasn't the time to hype him up. He reminded them they still had a boss to finish and urged everyone to wrap it up quickly. Slimy let out one last roar and told his squad to end it right now. He ordered everyone to throw everything they had at the boss. The feathered serpent dragon cried out as the team's combined final strike hit all at once. The impact triggered a huge explosion. Smoke and debris shot into the air. When everything cleared, the dragon was sprawled on the ground, eyes rolled back, tongue hanging out. A system message appeared, confirming the feathered serpent dragon had been fully defeated. Its HP bar was completely empty. A bright victory screen took over the interface. The squad gathered in a tight huddle, claws and hands stacked together in celebration. Slimy laughed, clearly pleased with how the fight went. He told them that playtime was over and their real training started now. Without wasting a second, he hopped toward the glowing cave exit. Xieju, Waji, Master B, and Xiaoduan followed close behind as they stepped out into the open world. The scene shifted to a bright forest filled with sunlight. A river ran smoothly between thick trees. Near the water's edge, a small round creature with a long tail bounced along. A system tag labeled it, Bouncy Mouse, Level 9. It had a worm in its mouth. Out of nowhere, an empowered tongue shot out from the shadows and struck the mouse with insane speed. The attacker stepped into view, a mimic stone cat, Level 21, its body covered in rough gray, rock-like scales. The cat secured its catch and let out a proud meow, clearly enjoying the successful hunt. But the moment didn't last. From above, a giant swamp mosquito, Level 35, dropped down. It drove its sharp proboscis deep into the cat's back. The mimic stone cat released a weak, fading meow as the stronger monster began feeding, claiming the hunt for itself. The giant swamp mosquito finished feeding, its abdomen swollen and pulsing with stolen blood. It left the dried-out remains of the mimic stone cat behind and drifted down to the river. Settling lightly on the water's surface, it began laying a cluster of eggs. Below the surface, several fish rushed in at once. They swarmed the spot and started devouring the eggs the moment they appeared. The mosquito reacted instantly. Its body sparked as it activated electric discharge. Blue lightning shot through the water, sending a violent surge in every direction. The nearby fish jolted from the blast, caught in the sudden wave of electricity. But the chain didn't stop there. From the depths, a massive mouth burst upward. An electric catfish, Level 44, surged out of the river and swallowed everything in reach. The mosquito, the stunned fish, and a huge gulp of water, all in one powerful snap. A blinding white light exploded across the river. High above, perched on a thick tree branch, Slimy watched it all unfold. He stared at the glowing water and said he couldn't believe it was happening again, especially so soon after dealing with the feathered serpent dragon. The light slowly faded. In place of the catfish was something far larger, a massive blue serpentine beast. A system tag appeared. Thunder Catfish, Level 52. The newly evolved monster wasted no time showing its strength. It unleashed Thunder Flash. A towering pillar of lightning blasted from the river, tearing through the water and shooting straight into the sky. Slimy stayed on his branch, looking down at the river in silence as the leftover sparks flickered across the surface. The forest grew calm again, but the air still carried the faint glow of electricity. Slimy held onto the tree branch, completely drawn in by the raw power he had just witnessed. He wondered out loud if his eyes were playing tricks on him, or if monster evolutions were really happening more often now. Right then, a system interface popped up in front of him. It began loading background data from the encyclopedia. When the progress bar hit 100%, a detailed map of the swamp forest appeared. The area was labeled as an S-rank danger zone, a place packed with high-level magic beasts where frequent evolution was considered normal. More information scrolled across the screen. The database showed a past battle record, Gone versus the Swamp Forest Monster Allied Army. It explained that the regional king, Kidoyelua, had gathered every intermediate and high-level magic beast in the forest to surround Gone. The outcome had been devastating. The entire Allied army was wiped out. In the aftermath, a massive scorched crater remained, and the ecosystem had been left in ruins. The report then shifted to the present. The region was now in a recovery phase. The land was steadily collecting magic power, using it to rebuild the environment and restart the monster's evolution cycle. The surviving intermediate beasts were benefiting the most from this surge of magic, essentially gaining priority access to evolve. The encyclopedia listed examples, including the feathered serpent dragon at level 89 and the newly evolved thunder catfish at level 52. It added that the food chain was about to be completely reshuffled, with every monster fighting for the chance to become the next ruler of the territory. When the recording ended, Slimy admitted that Brother Gon's database was way more useful than he had expected. He glanced at Xiaoduan, Waji, Master B, and Xieju, then wondered if monsters turned into his parasitic puppets could still evolve. That question stayed unanswered for now. He also couldn't help noticing something else. Even though he was only one level below the thunder catfish, the fish clearly felt much stronger than him. That detail bothered him more than he liked to admit. A new system notification appeared, explaining that level alone wasn't a perfect measure of strength. It stated that species traits and mastered skills played a huge role. It even included an example, saying that dragons produce dragons, but a level 100 mouse could still end up as nothing more than a snack for a young dragon. As for his puppets, the system reported that there was no relevant data available in the current records. Before Slimy could think further, a massive burst of blue lightning flashed in the distance. The sky lit up again. He looked toward the source and figured the thunder catfish was probably already fighting something else. Without hesitating, Slimy decided he needed to see it for himself and prepared to head in that direction. Slimy drifted closer to the crackling bursts of electricity. The yellow slime watched bright arcs flash through the air nearby. Stuck right in the middle of all that energy, he just stared and blurted out that this was insane. In the clearing ahead, a brutal fight was already reaching its end. A blue electrical catfish had wrapped its long body around a massive beast. A system tag popped up, labeling the target as a level 60 swamp crocodile. The crocodile let out a painful roar as waves of blue lightning ran through its body. Its eyes widened while the current surged again and again. Blood splashed across the muddy ground, then everything went quiet. From a tree branch nearby, Slimy watched both monsters collapse. He stared at the scene and wondered if luck had just delivered a huge reward right in front of him. Without waiting any longer, he jumped down from the branch and landed in the swamp water beside the bodies with a splash. Standing next to the remains, Slimy looked them over. One corpse had already started rotting, while the other looked badly burned. He figured parasitizing them probably wouldn't work in that condition. Still, he reached out to touch the remains. The moment his body made contact, leftover electricity surged through him. A sharp zap ran across his slime body, and damage numbers of -10 started appearing again and again. Slimy shook wildly from the current while shouting that there was still way too much electricity left in that thing. While enduring the constant shocks, he remembered the huge amount of honey he had eaten earlier, 115 portions in total. Right then, a system window flickered into view, announcing a state called nutritional overload. His HP display looked ridiculous, 50,000/3,909 with 1 hour remaining. Seeing the opportunity, Slimy decided to take advantage of it. His golden slime body expanded outward, spreading across the swampy ground. The liquid mass flowed over the fallen monsters and completely covered the level 60 swamp crocodile. Above the golden blob, a single word appeared: decompose. System notifications started pouring in. Messages listed experience points gained from breaking down the body. Another alert appeared, announcing a newly acquired skill: lightning attribute resistance. Inside Slimy's golden body, the crocodile's flesh quickly vanished until only a clean skeleton remained. Slimy commented that this actually felt pretty nice. Soon after, another system alert appeared, confirming that his experience had reached the requirement for a level up. Feeling the boost from the overload state, Slimy decided there was no reason to slow down. With so much time left, he planned to eat as much as possible. The massive golden blob surged forward into the swamp forest. Slimy moved across the land like a rolling wave, knocking down trees and pushing through the thick swamp. His body kept growing larger and larger, spreading across the terrain while swallowing every creature and plant in his path. He mentioned how fun this rampage felt as his experience points shot higher and higher. System notifications kept scrolling non-stop, each one reporting more experience gained through decomposition while Slimy continued devouring everything around him. Slimy looked out across the swampy landscape. As he scanned the area, his single eye grew wide after spotting something interesting. On the far side of the water, a huge mangrove forest stretched across the distance. The trees there looked far thicker and greener than the area he had been roaming. He started wondering if stronger monsters might live in a place like that. After staring at the distant forest for a moment, he decided he might as well go check it out. With a heavy splash, Slimy jumped straight into the water. The moment he sank beneath the surface, a swarm of red-scaled fish rushed toward him from every direction. The creatures immediately started biting into his golden slime body. Slimy looked irritated as damage numbers started popping up one after another. -40, -37. System alerts quickly followed, warning that he was under a massive attack and that his total HP loss had already passed 1,000. Slimy complained that these tiny fish actually had the nerve to attack him. He decided he might as well eat them to recover some HP. His slime body stretched outward and began absorbing the piranhas. Numbers for recovery appeared right away. +80, +60, +40. More system messages popped up, confirming that monsters had been killed and that he gained experience points through decomposition. But after a short moment, Slimy noticed something annoying. Eating one fish gave him around 80 HP, but the rest of the swarm was chewing away much more than that. The attacks from the others were draining close to 100 HP at the same time. He quickly concluded that this trade was terrible. Meanwhile, the swarm only kept growing. A massive school of piranhas surrounded him, turning the water into a dark moving cloud. System warnings intensified, stating that he was being attacked by a large number of monsters. His total HP loss kept rising. Still underwater, Slimy commented that there were way too many of them. Moving around in the water felt slow, which made it hard for him to react properly. Even though the fish were all below level 20, they were still chewing away far more HP than he could recover. Right then, another system interface appeared to explain the situation. It stated that level was mainly a vertical reference for strength and couldn't always show the real gap between different species. The system also explained that monsters acting as a group could become far more dangerous. Finally, it added that the devourer's benefit, which made his body gigantic, also made him an easy target in situations like this. Slimy complained that this was not the right time for system explanations. At this rate, he figured he might actually get wiped out. As the piranhas closed in again, Slimy quickly activated one of his skills. Plasmodial Barrage. A huge chunk of his golden slime mass shot upward with explosive force. The move cost him a massive 20,000 HP, but the recoil launched his body out of the water like a cannon blast. Moments later, Slimy crashed onto the grassy shore of the mangrove forest. He stayed there for a while, letting his body recover after that chaotic escape. Slimy sat on the grassy bank and looked back toward the water. Out there, a huge whirlpool of piranhas was still spinning around like a living storm. Watching the swarm, he started thinking about his honey supply. He wondered if eating more honey would let him turn giant again. The system answered right away with a short confirmation. It explained that he could, but the timer wouldn't reset. A digital countdown appeared in front of him. Current remaining time, 19 minutes and 29 seconds. Slimy accepted the condition without hesitation. Soon after, the rampage started again. His golden body expanded back into a massive sphere and began rolling through the mangrove forest. Trees snapped, bushes vanished, and rocks were pushed aside as the giant slime carved a wide path through the greenery. System notifications kept scrolling non-stop, reporting experience points gained from decomposition while Slimy flattened everything in his way. After a long stretch of destruction, the giant slime finally stopped. His huge body was now covered with uprooted trees, mud, and chunks of rock. Looking around, Slimy noticed something interesting. Even though the land he rolled over was cleared out, the plants nearby were already growing back at an incredible speed. He figured the Earth's magical energy must be feeding the land and helping everything grow that fast. Then his thoughts drifted toward a bigger idea. Slimy started thinking that overthrowing the church might not actually be that difficult. He knew his slime mold body didn't have dragon breath like a giant dragon, and he didn't have sharp claws or fangs like magical beasts. But he believed his real strength was something else, energy. According to him, he had already passed the hardest stage, going from 0 to 1, the beginning step where everything starts. A vision of the future formed in his imagination. His massive slime body appeared on the horizon beneath a glowing infinity symbol. The idea was simple: infinite decomposition, infinite absorption, infinite evolution. Slimy imagined himself devouring non-stop, day and night. If he kept doing that for about a month, he figured the church would eventually face something terrifying, a massive mold army gathering outside their gate. Slimy laughed proudly at the thought. Then a system box suddenly appeared. That won't work. Slimy immediately asked why. The system began loading data before presenting its explanation. It stated that as his level increased, the experience gained from decomposing low-level targets would decrease more and more. A formula appeared on the screen. A equals 0.95 carat delta. Then a table followed. 1 level difference, 95% experience. 5 levels difference, 77%. 10 levels difference, 60%. 20 levels difference, 36%. 50 levels difference, 7.7%. 100 levels difference, 0.6%. Slimy quickly understood the problem. That explained why his level hadn't increased at all even after rolling through the forest and decomposing so much stuff. Annoyed, he asked the system if it could just display exact experience values instead of complicated explanations. The system refused. It explained that calculating concrete values required a large amount of computing power and could only be handled through background simulation. Right after that, another alert appeared. Power overload state has ended. The system added that the requirement for the next activation would increase 5 times. At the same time, Slimy's massive golden body began shrinking quickly. The giant sphere collapsed inward until it returned to a small yellow blob. Around him were scattered skeletons and bones left from the earlier rampage. A notification appeared. Nutritional excess. Time up. Now back to his normal size, Slimy sat on the ground beside a skeletal hand. He commented that the system definitely seems smarter after the update. Still, he added that the whole AI customer service vibe was seriously irritating. The system calmly repeated its explanation about concrete values requiring too much energy while Slimy stared at the message with clear annoyance. Slimy sat on top of a skeletal hand and told the system to step down already. The system interface responded right away with a casual alrighty. Then the window faded away. Almost immediately, Slimy's body started swelling and shaking. His golden slime form puffed out as if something inside was pushing hard to get out. Through the strain, he muttered that he was full again. A moment later, everything burst out at once. A huge stream of waste shot out of his body. Bones, mushrooms, rocks, and all kinds of leftover debris from his earlier rampage flew everywhere. The pile kept growing as the mess scattered across the ground. When it finally stopped, Slimy, looking around at the destruction, he realized something important. If he wanted to keep leveling up, he would have to find enemies that were actually powerful. The view of the swamp stretched far into the distance under a golden sunset. The long path Slimy had cleared earlier was easy to see, cutting across the forest like a giant scar. It led all the way toward a distant body of water. Before long, Slimy arrived at the muddy edge of that area. The water had pulled back, leaving behind a thick bank of wet soil. He noticed that the tide had finally gone out, which revealed a new path forward. Slimy started sliding through the thick brown sludge toward the dense mangrove trees ahead. While moving forward, he wondered what kind of jungle monsters might be hiding deeper inside. The journey quickly turned messy. Mud stuck all over his body as he moved through the swampy ground. Slimy complained about how disgusting it felt, mentioning that he was already sticky enough without being covered in mud too. Slimy stood in the middle of a wide mudflat, looking around at all the holes scattered across the ground. There were way too many to count, and he couldn't help getting curious. He leaned over one of the dark openings and casually called out, telling whatever was inside to come out because he wanted to try eating it. Before anything else could happen, a tail suddenly shot out of the hole and smacked him directly. Mud splashed all over him, covering his body. Slimy reacted right away, saying that was seriously not okay, and told the thing inside to just wait. Then he dove straight into the hole without hesitation. Underground, the whole area started shaking as Slimy moved quickly between the tunnels. Mud burst out from different holes across the surface, popping up one after another. A fish-like creature suddenly got launched out of one of the holes and landed hard on the ground nearby. Slimy popped out after it, looking pretty unimpressed. He commented that now that they were on land, there was no reason for him to worry about a fish anymore. Right then, a system interface appeared and identified the creature as a level 17 mudskipper. The mudskipper pushed itself up using its fins, opened its mouth wide, and let out a loud, "Oh-ho!" Slimy stared at it, clearly surprised, wondering how a fish could even make a sound like that. Before he could think more about it, more mudskippers started crawling out of the holes, one after another, until there were dozens of them surrounding him. Slimy looked around and realized this wasn't just one opponent anymore. He pointed out that a whole group like this was way more dangerous than a single level 17. Then he looked at them and asked if they really thought he came alone just because they had numbers. With that, Slimy called out, summoning jutsu, stretching his body as a huge cloud of smoke burst across the area. When the smoke cleared, a giant crab and several other summoned allies appeared beside him. Slimy let out a small laugh, saying to himself that it was actually pretty cool being able to copy moves he'd seen in manga and use them for real. The mudskippers didn't wait around. They immediately used their move, Mudshot, firing a barrage of mud projectiles straight at the giant crab. The hits landed one after another, and the mud quickly hardened, completely covering the crab. The system soon marked it as immobilized. Watching this, Slimy noted that the mud worked like a restraint once it dried, but he didn't seem too concerned since his body was made of cytoplasm anyway. Then things got weird. The mudskippers suddenly stood upright and bent forward all at once, doing a deep, perfectly synchronized bow. Slimy just stared at them, completely caught off guard. His mind wandered as he imagined them as a group of well-dressed men bowing in front of him beside a fancy sports car, asking to follow him as their boss. Slimy snapped himself out of the daydream by smacking his own heads together, telling himself to cut it out. He reminded himself that whenever he got carried away like that, things usually went downhill fast. Not far from him, the mudskippers started tensing up, their bodies tightening like they were putting in a lot of effort. Then, all at once, they launched themselves into the air. Slimy watched them, a bit confused, wondering out loud if they were seriously putting on some kind of performance for him. Mid-air, the mudskippers began spinning fast, their bodies turning into blurs that looked like whirling discs. Slimy stared at them, calling them chainsaw fish as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The spinning creatures then dropped straight toward the giant crab, their sharp, buzzing edges slamming into it again and again. A system message popped up, saying the parasitic puppet's durability was dropping quickly and had already gone down to 55%. Right after that, the system started repairs. Slimy reacted immediately, using cytoplasmic injection and sacrificing 1000 HP to heal the crab. He told it to hold on, adding that he'd leave part of himself behind to act like a backup supply. Next, Slimy used consciousness shift, moving into a small, three-eyed pufferfish form. As one of the spinning mudskippers came at him, he shot out a stream of water, knocking it off course. Then, showing off a set of huge, sharp teeth, he activated Steel Fang Cut. With one strong bite, he tore straight through a mudskipper and took it down instantly. A system notification confirmed the defeat along with the experience he gained. The frog summon let out a loud croak as the spinning mud skippers zipped past it. It jumped forward and used tongue fist, firing its huge three-pronged tongue straight at them. But the moment it made contact, the spinning fish sliced right through it. The frog cried out as its tongue was cut clean off, and it just stood there while blood sprayed from the stump, the chainsaw fish continuing to tear through the area without slowing down. Watching this, Slimy said the puppets in auto mode were way too slow to react. He decided he had to take control himself if he wanted to deal with this properly. Using consciousness shift, he moved into the frog puppet just in time, lowering himself as one of the spinning fish passed right over his head. He admitted to himself that there were just too many of them coming at once. He didn't wait long to respond. Using empowered tongue, he struck one of the spinning fish head-on, sending it flying away. Right after that, he let out a quick shout and switched again, this time moving into a bee summon hovering above the fight. As more spinning mud skippers rushed toward him, Slimy activated triple beeswax barrier. 3 layers of golden, hexagon-shaped shields appeared in front of him, taking the hits as the fish slammed into them one after another. Looking down at the chaos, Slimy said he needed to lock them in place somehow before doing anything else. After a brief pause, he spoke up, saying he had just come up with something. Master Bee lifted his wooden stinger like he was about to prove a point, making it clear he was ready to show the flying fish who controlled the skies. He called out honey convergence, and a huge wave of thick golden honey rushed upward, catching the fish midair and dragging them together. It turned into a giant sticky sphere, trapping them completely as his wrap skill locked everything in place. The honey mass didn't stay whole for long. It started splitting into smaller chunks, dropping the trapped fish straight down. Right then, a small pufferfish jumped in like he didn't want to miss out. He let out a determined cry and activated inflate, puffing himself up into a giant spiked ball before crashing into the remaining fish with a heavy hit. Master Bee stayed above it all, telling the team to keep going. He used honey convergence again, spreading smaller sticky bubbles across the battlefield. Each one wrapped around fish that were still struggling on the ground, shutting down any chance of escape. When it was all over, Master Bee landed confidently and crossed his arms, acting like he'd planned everything perfectly. He pointed out that the honey's thickness worked exactly how he wanted, slowing down their slippery enemies just right. But Master Bee wasn't finished. He aimed his stinger forward and activated Spark Ember. What started as a small spark quickly turned into a huge column of fire that covered the honey-coated fish in a blazing explosion. The system instantly flooded the scene with notifications, stacking up EXP, confirmed kills, and successful breakdowns one after another. When the smoke faded, the squad stood among what was left of the defeated swarm, while the system bluntly labeled the enemies as trash and kept handing out rewards. A KDA screen popped up, showing Master Bee far ahead with 12 kills and 8 assists. Waji the frog followed behind with a simple 1-1-1 score. Slimy watched as Waji showed off near a fallen fish, and realized these parasite-controlled creatures still acted like themselves. Slimy figured Master Bee had carried the whole fight, but unlike Waji, he didn't try to show off. Even the pufferfish looked proud, shooting a stream of water into the air like he was celebrating. Then a rich, mouth-watering smell spread through the area, catching Slimy's attention. He started wondering where it was coming from as his senses reacted immediately. Looking around, he noticed the roasted fish covered in honey and realized the fire and honey had accidentally made something that smelled amazing. A system message confirmed it, saying he had discovered a new dish called honey roast fish, which was added to his cooking skill. Master Bee buzzed excitedly, while the crab and pufferfish started acting hungry. Slimy questioned if these parasite-controlled creatures actually wanted to eat too. Waji responded by sticking his tongue out in a playful way. Seeing how eager everyone was, Slimy decided there was no reason to hold back and told the group to go ahead and enjoy a well-earned feast together. Slimy was busy enjoying the results of the fight, taking his time with the honey-roasted fish. He noticed how the sweetness had soaked deep into the meat, bringing out a fresh flavor, while the high heat had crisped the skin perfectly and kept the inside soft. A system notification popped up, pointing out that breaking down cooked food actually gave even more EXP, almost like it was rewarding him for having good taste. The calm didn't last long. Slimy suddenly reacted, warning everyone that more enemies were still nearby and telling them to get ready. A loud thud shook the ground as a huge creature jumped into view. The system quickly identified it as a mud skipper boss at level 49. Extra details followed, explaining that it could remember its enemies and use sound waves to control its swarm. It usually depended on weaker creatures to gather food for it, and while its overall threat level was listed as average, it still had enough awareness to cause problems. Slimy didn't seem too concerned. He compared it to the queen bee and figured average didn't mean much compared to his own strength. He told himself there was no need to rush. if he just repeated the same strategy as before, winning should be simple. He turned to his team and asked if they were ready. Instead, he found the crab, Master B, the pufferfish, and Waji completely ignoring him, all focused on eating more roasted fish like nothing else mattered. Slimy called out in frustration, asking why they were still eating when the enemy was right there. The mud skipper boss didn't wait. It attacked immediately, slamming into the ground and sending mud everywhere. Then it used gulp down, lunging forward and swallowing the remaining fish in one huge bite. Slimy looked at his team, clearly disappointed, muttering that they were unbelievable. Seeing how messy things were getting, Slimy decided the current control method wasn't reliable enough. He switched to a more direct approach, extending strands of his cytoplasm and connecting them to each puppet. A system display showed the new setup, explaining that while it wasn't as precise as a full control link, it allowed much better coordination and faster reactions. Slimy got excited as he realized what he had just pulled off, saying it felt like he was controlling puppets directly and calling it a pretty cool upgrade. Meanwhile, the mud skipper boss stayed where it was, focused on eating what was left of its own group. Slimy watched, noting that a creature acting on pure instinct probably wasn't all that smart. Not wanting to give it more time, he gave the command to attack and pushed forward, pulling his puppets along through the connected strands. The boss responded with another loud cry and started moving, its heavy body jumping across the battlefield as the next fight kicked off. Waji the frog made the first move, jumping in fast and using empowered tongue to strike. The mud skipper boss didn't panic at all. It watched him come in with those wide, steady eyes, then swung its tail and sent Waji flying like it was nothing. Master B moved right after, staying in the air as he used Spark Ember. A bright fireball dropped straight onto the boss's face, blowing up in a burst of heat and light. Seeing it land cleanly, Slimy got excited and said the fight was basically done. That didn't last. As the smoke cleared, the boss was still standing, and now it looked irritated. It fired back with swamp flow art, raising a massive wave of thick mud and swamp water that towered over the battlefield. Slimy reacted immediately, shocked that it was using intermediate magic, and realized this thing actually had better magic control than Master Mantis. The scale of its mud control made it clear that going spell for spell wouldn't work. Slimy quickly switched plans, deciding the only way through that defense was to send someone in directly, even if it meant trading one fighter. He called out for Krabsuk to move. Nothing happened. The connection suddenly cut off, and Slimy noticed the broken cytoplasm strand, staring at it in confusion. He questioned how Krabsuk could just ignore orders like that. When he looked over, the crab wasn't even paying attention to the fight. It was still focused on eating the roasted fish like nothing else mattered. A system message explained what was going on. Even with the wired setup, the puppets still had an automatic mode, meaning they could act on what benefited them most unless Slimy controlled every move. And for Krabsuk, that meant eating to evolve instead of fighting. Right on cue, the crab started glowing with a strong golden light. Its body began to change as it shed its old shell, growing larger and heavier. In the middle of it all, a new form took shape, the Swamp Crab King. The system updated instantly, describing it as a boss-level scavenger with a shell as tough as iron and pincers strong enough to crush metal. It was labeled as a medium-threat creature, known for gathering gold from the mud and storing it in its body. Slimy didn't hesitate. Seeing the upgrade, he immediately used consciousness shift and took control of the new form. Now in charge of the massive golden crab, Slimy looked down at the mudskipper boss and started talking like he had already won. He pointed out that he was now controlling a medium-threat swamp crab king, while the boss was only considered average. The size difference alone made it obvious, the crab towering over the mudskipper. Slimy clicked the giant pincers together, getting ready to finish things, and told the boss to get ready for what was coming next. The golden swamp crab king rushed forward, with Slimy fully enjoying the power of controlling a boss-level body. He drove the massive crab ahead and went in with a huge pincer strike, aiming to finish the fight in one clean move. The mudskipper boss didn't react much. It stayed calm, lifting its fin as it prepared a counter called Fin Boomerang. A glowing green blade shot through the air at high speed and cut straight through the crab king's shell like it wasn't even there. The golden body split cleanly into two and crashed to the ground, while Slimy was thrown out, left staring at what just happened. He struggled to process it, questioning how it ended so quickly. Looking for answers, Slimy checked the system, but instead of combat details, it pulled up information from his cooking skill. A diagram explained that after a swamp crab molts, its new shell takes about 10 days to fully harden. During that time, its defense is extremely low, even though that's when it tastes the best. The guide casually described how to prepare it: coat it in flour, fry it in hot oil for a few minutes, and serve. It even mentioned that only the golden swamp crab king was safe to eat, since others carried heavy metals. Slimy paused for a second, distracted by the description, almost imagining the taste before catching himself and realizing how off track that was. He quickly called himself out for checking cooking info in the middle of a fight. At the same time, the mud skipper boss clearly enjoyed the outcome, catching its spinning fins and getting ready to throw another round of attacks at the now exposed Slimy. The mud skipper boss reaches down and picks up its severed fins, reattaching them to its head with a wet, squelching motion. It taps them into place, lets out a cry, strikes a defiant pose, and points a finger at its opponent. The Slimy reacts with annoyance, noting that as expected of an intelligent species, the monster is deliberately provoking it. It decides that defeating such a foe will yield a significant amount of experience points and declares that it is finally getting serious. Activating the skill search, the Slimy sends out a network of golden threads that crawl across the muddy battlefield, forming a glowing grid. The mud skipper boss looks down in confusion as the threads reach its feet. Suddenly, the Slimy calls out as a heavy, spiked mace erupts from the ground at the end of a slimy tentacle. The weapon slams into the mud skipper boss's side with force. However, a system window reveals the boss's slippery skin skill at maximum level, which allows it to dissipate impact force. This reduces physical damage by 50% to 70% and fire attribute damage by 20%. Despite the reduced impact, the Slimy remains undeterred, observing that while the skin deflects its attacks, it will simply grind the boss down over time. The mud skipper boss responds by unleashing its intermediate magic, Swamp Flow Art. A massive, churning wave of mud rises from the ground, towering over the battlefield. As the mud crashes down, it tears through the Slimy's golden grid, severing the connections. The Slimy reacts in frustration as its formation is broken. In the chaos, a series of explosions rip through the mud wave while a bee puppet circles above. The mud skipper boss watches as sharp mud spikes erupt from the ground, shooting toward the bee puppet. At the same time, a frog puppet leaps into the air, extending its long tongue in a desperate attempt to remain in the fight. The Slimy navigates the chaotic battlefield, observing that the entire mud pit is being utilized by the enemy, who possesses a clear home field advantage. It admits to underestimating the opponent, noting that monsters which have gained sentience experience a qualitative leap in combat power compared to others of the same level. From the center of a swirling mud vortex, the mud skipper boss lets out a loud cry and launches its fin boomerang. The Slimy identifies its puppet, Xiaoduan, as the pufferfish inflates itself to intercept the attack. The spinning fins strike with devastating force, triggering a system notification that the parasitic puppet's durability is rapidly dropping, falling from 47% to 23%. Xiaoduan is shattered by the impact, and a notification confirms the parasitic puppet is destroyed. As the Slimy is propelled forward by the explosion, it thanks Xiaoduan, declaring that the sacrifice will not be in vain thanks to the cushioning provided by the puppet's destruction. Landing directly on the spinning fins, the Slimy declares its capture and activates the skill dissolution. The mud skipper boss lets out a muffled cry as its fin is engulfed. A system notification confirms that the decomposition is successful and experience points have been gained. The mud skipper is devastated by the thought of losing his precious fin, while the Slimy remains unable to fully comprehend its significance, having never possessed such a part, though it recognizes it held deep importance for the creature. The boss is broken down, leaving the creature to collapse face down into the mud. The Slimy laughs while glowing as it imagines the mud skipper boss without fins. Suddenly, the boss erupts in a furious cry, its eyes turning bloodshot with pure rage as it vows to kill the bastard. The Slimy is shocked, exclaiming that the creature can talk. A reading from the encyclopedia explains that if a monster experiences intense emotional stimulation during combat, it may trigger intellectual evolution, thereby mastering language abilities. Standing amidst sharp mud spikes, the mud skipper boss activates intermediate magic, Swamp Flow Art. The Slimy remains unfazed, wielding a massive spiked mace and declaring that it is time to settle this. It boasts that with this move, it has even taken down a sanctified fall monster. Spinning the weapon with immense speed, the Slimy unleashes its plasmatic cannon. The mud skipper boss claps its hands together as massive mud walls rise to block the path. The spiked mace hurtles forward, smashing through the barriers with heavy force. It tears through layer after layer of the mud defense until the tip of the weapon suddenly stops, inches from the mud skipper boss's face. The boss stares in stunned silence as the attack halts just before impact. The Slimy reels in shock as its attack is completely blocked, fearing that at this rate, even its weapon will be confiscated by the enemy. Suddenly, a system notification appears, stating that conditions have been matched for martial arts talent. The notification explains that this talent allows for the natural creation of suitable martial arts moves based on one's own conditions and identifies a currently releasable move. Confused by the sudden development, the Slimy questions what it means to create moves using martial arts talent. However, it quickly pushes the thought aside, deciding that it does not matter and it must simply unleash the power first. Lunging forward, the slimy activates the newly acquired skill, Water Hammer. A massive shockwave ripples through the mud as the attack connects. The mud skipper boss is driven backward by the overwhelming force, pinned against a wall of mud by the golden staff. The creature's eyes widen in terror as it is crushed by the weight of the blow. The mud wall collapses in a violent spray of earth and debris, burying the boss beneath it. The mud skipper boss is left defeated, slumped headfirst in the mud with its legs twitching as the dust settles. At the royal capital's holy see, a huge cathedral towered under an orange sky, its presence impossible to ignore. Inside, a grand hall stretched out, lined with rows of golden statues, each one posed with hands pressed against their chest. High above it all, Pope Vikros stood on a balcony, looking down at the vast space below. He calmly said it had already been 3 days. All of Merlin's candles of fate had gone out, and none of them had lit back up. From his point of view, that could only mean one thing: Merlin had given up her life in the end. He added that his world magic couldn't pick up any trace of Gone anymore either, so as far as he was concerned, the threat was dealt with. After that, he looked over the gathered group and asked what they thought. Up in the darker part of the upper level, Far, Guild Master of the Red Eye Guild and one of the 7 Holy Knights, spoke up. He said Merlin had always been the type to plan ahead, so there was no way she hadn't set up backups. Still, he admitted it didn't sit right with him that Gone, who had been stuck and worn down in the swamp forest for over 2 years, could actually take her down with him. Far said there was a chance that Transmigrator was still hiding something, and suggested they just head over there and wipe the entire swamp forest out to avoid any future problems. Pope Vikros gave a small nod, saying Far was as careful as ever, but he didn't agree. He explained that the swamp forest's strong life force was something they couldn't afford to lose. To him, it was a necessary sacrifice that had to be preserved. He reassured Far that his world magic didn't get things wrong, Gone was already gone. Then he shifted the topic, saying the bigger issue now was restoring the strength of the 7 Holy Knights. Merlin's death, he said, couldn't be allowed to slow down the Grand Ascension plan. Right after that, he mentioned that a fitting candidate had just arrived and told them to come forward. From the far end of the hall, a single figure walked down the long central aisle toward the council. The young woman stopped at the front and politely greeted the Pope and the Holy Knights. Looking down at her, Dear, the Guild Master of the Holy Anthem Guild, commented that Merlin's disciple did seem like a good choice, though her personality was completely different from her teacher's. Nearby, Louisa, an S-rank adventurer from the Blue Hat Guild and Merlin's oldest disciple, was already breaking down. Through tears, she begged the Pope and the Holy Knights to find a way to save her teacher. She said she didn't know what to do anymore, and without Merlin, the Blue Hat Guild was basically finished. From above, Vane, the Guild Master of the Hawkeye Guild, cut in with a mocking tone. He said it didn't really matter and casually offered to take her in if her guild collapsed. Then he added that anyone below A rank wouldn't be accepted. Louisa held herself together as best she could and thanked Vane, but she turned him down. She said she had promised her master she would stay with the Blue Hat Guild for her whole life. Then she looked back up at the Pope and begged again, saying she was willing to give everything if it meant saving Merlin, even offering herself in exchange for the angel's grace. Pope Vikros smiled slightly as he listened, saying the bond between master and disciple was quite something. He asked her if she was really sure about offering herself like that just to save Merlin. Louisa, shaking but firm, looked up and said she was ready. Pope Vikros let out a quiet chuckle and commented that even angels had their limit. He then told everyone that Merlin's soul had been completely erased, and there was no chance of her ever coming back. With that, he formally declared that from this day on, the Blue Hat Guild, and the position among the 7 Holy Knights, would pass to Louisa. Louisa kept crying, calling out for her master, her voice breaking as she struggled to hold herself together. Vane cut in from above, telling her to get a grip and stop crying. He reminded her that plenty of people far stronger than her had never even been considered for a spot among the 7 Holy Knights. Hearing that, Louisa slowly wiped her tears and lowered her head. She admitted he was right to call her out. Then she said she would carry on her master's will, take responsibility for the Blue Hat Guild, and serve the Holy See with everything she had. The scene shifted to a few days earlier. In a dim, blue-lit chamber, Louisa stepped inside, asking if her master was okay after her tracking magic suddenly reacted. On the ground nearby, a dried, skeletal hand lay beside a glowing magic circle. Not far from it, Merlin's shriveled body rested against a stone structure, barely holding together. Without warning, Merlin's eyes opened with a sharp flash. Her body moved forward as her thoughts rushed all at once. She mentally cursed Gone while going over the soul fragments she had planted inside her disciples as a backup plan. From what she could tell, Louisa had the best compatibility. That meant this could still work: possession, rebirth, starting over. Merlin called out to Louisa, urgently telling her to come closer and give her hand. Louisa didn't move. Instead, she stayed where she was, her eyes giving off a strange, cold glow. She said she didn't want to. Then she explained that as long as she avoided physical contact, The spell Merlin had carved into her heart wouldn't activate. She added, almost casually, that she had been reading the forbidden black magic book in secret. Merlin's voice turned frantic as she told Louisa to listen to her and do as she said before it was too late. She begged her to save her, saying she would pass on everything she knew. Louisa's expression didn't change. She told Merlin not to act like that and said she would help her, right now. Then she pulled out a massive, dark magic book. Without hesitation, she brought it down hard onto Merlin's skeletal body. The impact echoed through the chamber as she kept striking again and again. Blood splattered across the floor and walls. Standing there covered in it, Louisa smiled in a wild, unsteady way as she quietly said she was giving her master immediate release. She let out a low laugh and added that once Merlin was gone, everything would belong to her. Back in the muddy terrain, the wide-eyed mudskipper lay still in the dirt, keeping low. A moment later, its large orange eyes widened as it realized the situation wasn't going its way. It quickly pushed itself up and rushed off, mud scattering behind it as it moved. While retreating, it glanced back at the trail it left, thinking that she hadn't fallen for the trick. Not far ahead, Slimy rode on top of Waji, telling him to pick up the pace. He pointed out that the system hadn't shown any defeat XP, which meant the mudskipper wasn't actually finished, either just down for a moment or faking it. From his perspective, there was no reason to gamble on that, so getting away stayed the top priority. Behind them, the mudskipper surged forward, its presence easy to track as it closed the distance across the flats. Its eyes rose from the mud as it chased them with clear focus. Slimy noticed it gaining on them and told Waji it was getting close. Instead of trying to outrun it in a straight line, he told him to change direction, making it clear that staying out in the open would only work against them. Waji reacted immediately and leaped toward a dense patch of mangrove-like trees. The mudskipper followed right after, forcing its way through the tangled vegetation, its movement rough but relentless. Using the cover, Waji and Slimy slipped behind a thick tree trunk and stayed out of sight. From there, Slimy watched closely and went over his options. He noted that his water hammer strike needed space to stretch before releasing it, and he doubted the mudskipper would fall for the same move again. On top of that, its control over the mud made things worse, especially in terrain like this. Even though part of him wanted to finish it here, he decided it wasn't worth the risk. Among the roots, the mudskipper paused, its body lighting up with faint yellow spots. It called out, asking the little yellow bastard if hiding was really going to help. Then it activated Swamp Flow Art at full range. Across the forest, the ground started shifting, mud bubbling and moving in every direction. Slimy watched as the mud around their hiding spot began to react. He quickly understood that it was scanning the area. Before he could act, the mudskipper lunged straight at their exact location, saying it had found them. With no Slimy shot out a long, golden strand from his body, driving it deep into the ground below. Up in the air, Master B grabbed onto the end of it as levitation activated, lifting everything upward. As the line tightened, Slimy pulled hard, dragging Waji out of the mud where he had been stuck. He kept urging him on, saying Waji could make it as the stretched strand held under the strain. All of a sudden, Waji let go of the golden appendage. A system message appeared right after, explaining that parasitic puppets in automatic mode would always choose the most beneficial action for the main body. Down below, Waji dropped straight back into the mud, letting out a rough croak as he landed. Up in the sky, Master B kept flying, carrying Slimy along through the fading light. From the forest floor, the mudskipper looked up at them and made it clear it wasn't letting them escape. It steadied itself, crossing its arms as it focused. Then it unleashed Swamp Flow Art. The ground burst apart as mud and uprooted trees surged upward, tearing through the forest canopy and chasing after them. High above, Slimy looked back, annoyed that the attack was still coming. He called out to the mudskipper, telling it to drop already, then activated cytoplasmic machine gun. A continuous stream of hardened golden shots rained down, striking the mudskipper again and again as it stood in the middle of the destruction caused by its own magic. The mudskipper pushed itself out from under the pile of mud and debris, checking if the attack had finally ended. It didn't wait long before calling out toward Master B and using its magic again, stirring up another violent swirl of mud and rock. The vortex surged upward, and an explosion of debris followed. Heavy chunks of stone shot through the air and slammed into Master B mid-flight. Even after the hit, Master B kept flying through the fading light, still carrying Slimy along. But now blood streamed from a large, jagged wound along his side. His movement slowed, then his body tightened as if making a decision. In the next moment, he pushed forward with a sudden burst, sending Slimy flying ahead like a launched projectile. As Slimy was thrown forward, he turned back and called out to Master B. Despite the damage, Master B looked back one last time and gave a steady thumbs up. In the next moment, the mudskipper surged forward and swallowed Master B whole. As Master B disappeared from sight, Slimy drifted forward in silence. He reflected on their time together, saying that even if puppets could be replaced anytime, they still ended up forming bonds during the fight. He added that he would remember him. Pushing forward, Slimy reshaped his body, flattening it into a wide, square form to glide through the air. Below him, the dense forest slowly gave way to a cracked, barren wasteland. As he moved over it, he noted that the terrain ahead was no longer a mudflat. He descended toward the dry ground, preparing to land. The moment he touched down, he wondered if this place might finally be safe. It wasn't. Right away, multiple HP-200 indicators appeared as his health dropped fast. His body stretched upward as the damage hit, forcing him to quickly jump onto a nearby patch of dry grass. Catching a moment to recover, he pointed out that his HP was falling way too quickly just from touching the ground. The system encyclopedia finished scanning and confirmed the area was a high salinity zone known as saline alkali land, explaining that it caused an osmotic pressure imbalance. Slimy questioned it, saying he had already adapted to something like that before. The system clarified that his earlier adaptation only worked in high moisture conditions, while this land constantly drained water without limit, reducing anything caught in it to nothing over time. Looking out across the wasteland, Slimy wondered how he was supposed to get through. Slimy looked ahead and admitted he had no clear way out. The grass patches were too far apart, making it hard to move safely between them. Then something crashed down behind him. He turned and saw the mudskipper boss again. He couldn't believe it was still chasing him. Slimy pointed out that he had only taken out a few of its underlings, while the mudskipper had already destroyed his puppets, so things should be even by now. He added that this non-stop chase was getting excessive. The mudskipper shut him down right away, calling him a disgusting yellow lump and bringing up its ruined hair again. It made it clear it wasn't letting this go and said it would finish him no matter where he ran. It even mentioned that the anger was making its magic stronger. Then its tone shifted. It started reacting to something else, confused as pain hit it just from standing there. Its body moved erratically for a moment before it jumped again, landing right where Slimy was. That forced Slimy off the grass patch. He complained about how persistent it was as he landed on the cracked ground, taking constant damage. To keep going, he relied on his honey reserves, but the system soon warned him that they were fully depleted and told him to leave the saline alkali land immediately. Behind him, the mudskipper watched, clearly enjoying the situation. It urged him to keep going and wear himself down. Slimy looked toward the next grass patch and admitted he wouldn't make it at this rate. He quickly started pulling items out of storage, searching for anything useful. Then he found it. A heavy armored foot stepped onto the ground. The mudskipper paused, confused, as a second armored leg appeared. Slimy climbed onto them, using the armor to block the damage from the terrain just as he expected. The legs weren't easy to control at first. He struggled to move and nearly lost his balance, forcing himself to stabilize. The stance felt awkward, but at least he was managing to stay upright. After a few attempts, he adjusted. He compared it to walking on stilts, strange at first but manageable once you got used to it. With that, he started moving forward and told the mudskipper he was heading out first. The mudskipper immediately tried to stop him, activating swamp flow art again. This time, nothing happened. Slimy pointed out the obvious. There was no mud here, so the magic couldn't work the same way. The mudskipper only got more frustrated, making it clear it still wasn't letting him escape. A few minutes later, Slimy kept moving across the barren ground on his armored legs. Something in the distance caught his eye, a faint glow standing out against the dull landscape. He focused on it as he moved closer, curiosity building. Before long, he figured it out. It was a portal. Looking out across the horizon, Slimy stood on his stone-armored legs and stared at the glowing portal in the distance. The sight caught his attention right away, but a massive salt lake stretched between him and it. The surface shimmered, and he understood that stepping into it would drain him dry almost instantly, then turned away, saying he wasn't strong enough yet and that it wasn't time to head into the human world. Night settled over the forest as rain poured down. At the base of a huge, twisted tree, small gravestones rested among scattered flowers. A system screen appeared, showing Slimy's current status. He was a slime mold, level 5, with the battle title Weak Creature Lord and the Decomposer trait. Slimy went over everything. He noted that parasitic domination was a merged skill, so upgrading it cost double, and at his current level he could control up to 7 puppets. He reflected that he had just started getting stronger, only to lose everything to the mudskipper, meaning he had to build it all up again. Looking around, he pointed out that as the environment recovered, stronger monsters would appear. That meant more experience, but also more danger. He decided the safest option was to stay hidden and slowly build up strength. A flash of lightning lit up the storm outside. Seeing the rain pouring down, Slimy realized he had forgotten to close the entrance. He moved over and stretched out a thin, long appendage, pulling the wooden cover into place. Right then, his eye widened. Standing in the puddles outside was the mudskipper, its eyes glowing red as it stared straight at him. It said it had finally found the little yellow target. Then everything shifted. Slimy jolted awake as pain hit him, and he was thrown upward, letting out a terrified scream. Back inside the hollow, Slimy pressed himself against the wooden support and told whatever was there to stay away. After a second, he realized nothing was actually there. He let out a breath, saying it was just a nightmare and admitting the encounter had stuck with him. By morning, sunlight filtered through the forest canopy. Slimy stood on the grass facing 3 smaller yellow slime minions. He gave them a clear order to head out, gather nearby materials, and bring them back so he could decompose them. Slimy gave the order, telling them to go, and his 3 minions shot off into the forest with sudden energy. Once they were gone, he focused on his next goal. He decided to aim for level 60 first, recalling that the system had mentioned he could evolve or change class once he reached that point. Before he could think further, something dropped onto his head with a dull hit. He stayed still as a small droplet splashed from the impact. Up on a thick tree trunk, a blue swamp chameleon with orange eyes looked down at him. Its long tongue stretched all the way to the ground, holding Slimy in place. Slimy's expression turned cold as he commented that low-level monsters still couldn't tell who was the hunter and who was the prey. As the chameleon pulled its tongue back, a sharp red fragment stayed lodged in the tip. Blood splattered as the creature jerked back in pain. It reacted quickly, activating its camouflage and climbing up the tree, its body blending into the surroundings. Slimy didn't move. He activated a search, and a glowing grid swept across the tree bark. He noted that invisibility was useful, but not against him. The scan locked onto the target. In the next instant, Slimy moved in and declared he had found it. A system message confirmed it. Parasitic puppet a swamp chameleon X1. The details showed the puppet had 87% durability and skills like tongue fist, tongue whip, and camouflage. The scene shifted through the dense forest. Before long, the 3 minions returned, dragging back a massive pile of materials, including crabs and other shelled creatures. Slimy looked it over and said they had done well. He thought about what to do next, noting that because of the level gap, breaking things down directly didn't give enough experience. He needed a more efficient method. A golden interface labeled cooking appeared with a spatula icon. The system explained that processing ingredients this way could boost EXP and sometimes add extra effect. Standing in front of the pile, Slimy told Atong to check what dishes were available. A scan started right away. A list of options appeared. Charcoal grilled platter could restore a large amount of HP and give extra buffs along with 1500 XP. Fresh fish roasted restored a small amount of HP and boosted energy. Greasy mushroom soup provided steady recovery over time. Dry-fried bugs offered minimal recovery but were simple. At the bottom of each option, though, the same message showed up. He didn't meet the conditions to make any of them yet. Slimy went through the recipe list again and quickly noticed a problem. Every decent dish needed fire. That left him wondering what he could even make without it. After checking the options more carefully, he found one exception: normal salad. The description didn't help. It was just washed ingredients thrown together, nothing special, restoring somewhere between 50 and 300 HP with no extra effects. Slimy questioned why something like that even existed. He decided getting fire shouldn't be that hard. He remembered clearing out all the beehives nearby during his last nutritional overload, so the master bees were gone. That meant he had to think of something else. Then he remembered a better option. Deeper in the forest, a small fire squirrel sat quietly, its flame-like tail flickering as it ate. Before it could react, Slimy dropped down with his heavy stone armor, pinning it to the ground. He noted that this creature's fire looked even stronger than what the master bees had. The squirrel lay there dazed, barely reacting, as a system message confirmed it had been turned into a puppet. Fire squirrel with 76% durability and skills including flame bullet, agile movement, and self-destruct. Slimy immediately gave it an order: heat up a stone slab. The squirrel followed without hesitation, using its fire to blast heat into the underside of a large stone. Before long, the slab started giving off a strong, steady heat. Slimy got into position, wearing a red headband and holding a spatula made from partially decomposed wood. He declared it was time to cook and mentioned that this kind of cooking had depth to it. With cooking activated, he got to work. Shrimp, scallops, and fish moved across the heated surface as his limbs handled everything at once. 2 hours passed, and he reached the final step. He added a bit of salt collected from the saline land, taking a small hit to his HP in the process. As everything came together, a bright pillar of light rose from the dish. Slimy looked at the result and said it was finally done. In front of him sat a full spread, seafood and meat arranged on a large platter, a bowl of rich mushroom soup, and a side of fried bugs. Slimy didn't bother pretending to be polite. The moment the meal was ready, he swallowed the whole thing in one go and kicked off dissolution right after. The system jumped in with updates, saying he'd gained a huge amount of experience points, His energy was recovering fast, and he'd even picked up a beginner cold resistance effect for 20 minutes. As the taste settled in, Slimy took a moment to go over it. He figured the flavor was seriously rich, way beyond a simple mix of ingredients. In his view, the ingredients didn't just end when they were eaten, they changed into something new. Their end turned into a better version of flavor, which, to him, summed up what cooking really meant. Right on cue, the system announced that his experience had hit the requirement. It confirmed his level went from 51 to 52. Off to the side, the fire squirrel puppet finished its own portion with a soft creak. Slimy noted that cooking took more time, but the payoff in experience easily beat just breaking things down directly. 2 weeks later, things looked very different. The map of the area had expanded a lot. The saline alkali land, the high-tide mangrove forest, and the low-tide mudflats were now all marked as part of the explored slime mold territory. After covering everything, Slimy had spread his hyphae across the entire region. Hitting another milestone, Slimy checked his current status. Species: Slime Mold LV54. Achievement: Weak Creature Lord. About a kilometer away, a yellow frog puppet, Waji 3.0, moved through the forest. Slimy explained his newest setup, the Slime Signal Relay. By leaving split bodies around as signal base stations, he could control his parasitic puppets from far away. Those split bodies kept themselves going by feeding off the trees they latched onto, so they could stay active for a long time. With enough of them in place, Slimy could instantly take control of any puppet within his territory. Then, out of nowhere, a massive black foot came down and crushed Waji 3.0. Slimy picked up on the loss right away and wondered what just happened. He quickly switched over using consciousness shift, taking control of a nearby yellow bird puppet to check things out. It didn't take long to spot the intruder. The encyclopedia kicked in, explaining that the creature was a berserk swamp bull, low intelligence but extremely dangerous. It was covered in scales, immune to anything below high-tier magic, and packed with raw strength. It rampaged without restraint and could release intimidation. The warning was clear: high danger, not something to face head-on. Slimy shifted again, moving his awareness to a base station right in the bull's path. He recognized the creature's heavy aura and treated it as a serious threat, but made it clear he wasn't backing down. He sent out a warning that anything entering his territory should be ready to get eaten, then fired a plasmatic cannon. The bull answered immediately with death pressure. The system reported that Slimy had been hit by the effect. The encyclopedia added that death pressure worked through eye contact, applying mental force depending on the gap in strength. If the difference was too big, it could end things instantly. A system alert popped up showing HP -850, followed by a message confirming the split body had been destroyed. The berserk swamp bull didn't slow down at all, continuing its rampage as it tore across the forest floor. Then the setup kicked in. Yellow hyphae spread out from the surrounding trees, forming a tight web around the area. Slimy activated search, and a grid appeared, locking onto the bull's position. The creature bit at the glowing threads, trying to tear through them, but another one of Slimy's bodies showed up on a nearby branch. Slimy had that body toss several mace-like projectiles while calling out for attention, telling the bull to look his way. At the same time, he went over the situation, noting that the bull clearly had more raw strength than the mudskipper he dealt with before, but its low intelligence made it easier to handle. He figured that as long as he stayed clear of its dangerous attacks, he could wear it down over time. From above, more heavy mace projectiles dropped toward the bull. The impacts hit hard, shaking the ground and kicking up dust. But once the air cleared, the bull was still standing, completely unaffected. Slimy reacted with a short comment, sounding surprised at how durable it was. The bull answered right away. Its eyes lit up in a deep red glow as death pressure activated. A massive skeletal reaper shape appeared behind it, locking onto Slimy, along with a heavy -999 damage indicator. The bull pushed forward, smashing through a tree and sending that slime body flying apart. It kept going, then released Skull Blast. The explosion ripped through the area, tearing apart what was left of the surroundings and scattering debris everywhere. When everything settled, the bull stood alone in a cleared-out section of the forest, surrounded by destruction. Up in the dense foliage, a faint golden glint flickered. Then a thick yellow tendril shot out with a sharp sound, hitting the bull right in an unprotected spot from behind. Slimy stretched his body to keep hold, commenting that the bull was tightening up a lot. He went over his usual approach again, pointing out that no matter how tough something looked, there was always a weak point somewhere. He compared it to how a hyena hunts. Simple, direct, and effective, and mentioned that the bull had already been caught by his mold. The bull reacted immediately. Its eyes burned with intense anger as it started kicking and thrashing hard enough to shake the ground, trying to force the tendril out. Even with all that movement, Slimy held on. Then he activated Water Hammer. The tendril inside expanded suddenly, forming a jagged structure that tore through the bull from within. The creature let out one last cry as its head jerked back, its body giving out under the internal damage. Inside, Slimy's yellow mold spread through the muscle, pushing further as it took over. In Slimy's imagination, he pictured himself dressed in a sharp suit, wearing a surgical mask and gloves, adjusting his glasses with a calm, clinical vibe. He remarked that it was now his turn, getting ready to begin his work. A thick stream of yellow fluid moved through a narrow, ribbed tunnel inside the bull's body. As Slimy traveled deeper, he noted that, luckily for him, the bull must have emptied itself before going on its rampage since he hadn't run into any annoying obstacles on the way. Further in, he reached a chamber packed with half-digested grass and realized he'd made it to the stomach. A moment later, pressure launched him upward like a geyser shooting through an opening inside the massive body. At the same time, Slimy's yellow mold kept spreading through the bull's muscles. The berserk swamp bull roared in pain, blood spraying from its mouth as the infection spread further inside it. Slimy decided it was time to leave. He started crawling toward a fresh wound, mentioning that he'd just used that as his exit. Activating search, he scanned the bull's insides as a digital grid spread over the creature's organs. Then he found what he was looking for. Slimy aimed a plasmatic cannon directly at the bull's heart. The mechanical structure charged up and fired a high-speed shot straight through the organ. That ended it. The berserk swamp bull collapsed onto the forest floor, motionless as blood poured from its body. Right after, the system announced that Slimy had killed a high-level monster above his own level and gained a massive amount of EXP. Another message followed, saying decomposition was continuing and more EXP was being gained. While processing the corpse, Slimy noticed one of the bull's horns was broken. He wondered whether it happened during a fight with another bull or if something even more dangerous had attacked it before. Looking around the swamp forest, he commented that the monsters in the area were way beyond what he expected and guessed there might be a huge mana source nearby. Still, he pushed those thoughts aside for later and focused on the bull itself. Since the hide was too durable to handle from the outside, he continued decomposing it from within. The system soon confirmed decomposition success. Slimy obtained high-level swamp bull meat along with swamp bull hide, which counted as a high-level forging material. Seeing the amount of EXP he gained, he started wondering if cooking the remaining meat would give even better result. After letting out a satisfied burp, he sat beside the bull's skull and thanked it for the meal. Elsewhere, a massive teleportation gate crackled back to life. Blue energy surged into the sky as the sealed gate reopened after 2 years. B-rank adventurer Jim Cook from the Silverleaf Guild stepped through first, celebrating the gate finally reopening. Beside him, B-rank Shadowstalker Lena Short from the Grey Rock Guild looked far less excited, complaining that the whole place was packed with bugs and saying she only came because Jim kept asking. Above them, mages from the Blue Hat Guild flew across the area using intermediate magic, lights or wings. Jim muttered that they were playing unfair, while Lena pointed out that flight magic was basically the Blue Hat Guild's specialty anyway. The adventurers eventually reached the edge of Death Salt Lake. Lena warned everyone to think carefully before crossing since falling into the lake would dry them out instantly like jerky. Jim then introduced what he called their great helper, a rookie B-rank adventurer named Xiaoxi Green. Xiaoxi politely greeted the group and asked everyone to look after her before activating Flash Freeze. In seconds, the lake surface froze solid, forming a huge ice bridge stretching across the water. The adventurers were impressed, commenting that her magic looked just as strong as what the Blue Hat Guild could do. The group quickly started running across the frozen bridge, eager to gather enough life energy to claim the bounty. Jim and Xiaoxi followed behind while Jim warned that most rookies didn't understand how dangerous the swamp forest really was. A second later, his warning proved correct. The water exploded upward as a massive creature burst out, biting into one of the adventurers while smashing apart the ice bridge. The entire group stopped in fear. A man wearing sunglasses explained that the creature had evolved into a three-headed form by absorbing the overflowing magic leaking from the portal over time. Towering above them was the three-headed swamp snake. He identified it as a Lord-class high-level monster and ordered everyone to pay attention to his commands during the fight. Back in the forest, Slimy was busy roasting a swamp snake hatchling over a campfire. A description window explained that the food restored 400 HP and boosted movement speed in swamp areas by 15% for 30 minutes. The heat from the fire was intense though. Slimy fanned himself while complaining about how hot it was, just as an HP-40 indicator popped up. While eating, he started thinking about his next move. He decided it was finally time to improve his silkworm armor for better defense since he couldn't rely on the same weak point strategy against every high-level monster. After announcing that eating time was over and business time was starting, Slimy prepared to enter a deep state. The system immediately warned him that folding his consciousness into the slime mold space could expose his main body to danger. Slimy brushed the concern aside, pointing out that he already had mycelium warning systems and parasitic puppets nearby to keep watch. With a smug grin, he entered the slime mold space, a massive digital-like grid filled with stored items and floating icons. Inside the slime mold space, an interface appeared with 2 empty slots labeled primary materials and secondary materials. A system message told Slimy to place in the forging materials he wanted to use. By combining the forging skill he got from Gon with his own decomposition trait, he could handle the entire forging process directly inside the digital space without needing actual tools. With a quick command telling it to come out, the broken knight armor appeared on the grid floor, surrounded by a glowing circular aura. Slimy selected the swamp bull horn and swamp bull hide as the materials. Another window popped up, warning him that a failed attempt would destroy every material involved. Slimy looked at the screen calmly and reasoned that the armor's durability was already at 0 anyway, so there wasn't much point worrying about failure. He pressed the forge button, his focus sharpening as the process started. A massive pillar of light burst upward, swallowing the armor and materials whole. Inside the flash, everything fused together and reformed into something new. Back in the real world, Slimy watched with anticipation as a metal gauntlet burst upward from a pile of yellow mold. Right after that, a heavy metal boot slammed down onto the grass. The system confirmed the result. Forging successful. Obtained. Shield Force Armor Trash. According to the appraisal atlas, the armor could absorb most physical attacks and reduce damage or effects from intermediate and lower-tier magic by 35%. Sitting behind the completed armor in the forest, Slimy celebrated the success right away. He immediately jumped into the suit and activated Dominion to control it. His yellow slime spread throughout the metal frame, filling the helmet, chest, arms, and legs. Inside his mind, a special control interface appeared under the name Slime Mold Squadron. Slimy positioned his main consciousness in the head section while 4 split bodies handled the right arm, right leg, and left leg separately. The armor stood tall, though Slimy quickly noticed it looked a little different now. A comparison display showed that because of material loss during repairs, its height had dropped from 1.9 meters to 1.7 meters. Slimy brushed that off immediately, figuring size didn't matter much when there wasn't even a real human body inside it. He actually found that using Dominion across 5 split bodies made the armor move much more smoothly than before. To test the new setup, the armored figure marched through the forest and launched one of its gauntlets forward like a rocket. Activating Cytoplasmic Fist, the metal hand blasted through the air and smashed into a tree trunk with overwhelming force, leaving behind a huge, shattered impact mark. Slimy looked over the results of the test and decided the power and accuracy were both pretty solid. With a loud call to recall it, the armored fist shot back through the air and locked itself onto his arm again. Standing confidently inside the upgraded suit, Slimy felt better than ever. His house was bigger now, and his equipment was much stronger too. Then a tiny chunk of yellow mold slipped off the armor's shoulder. Slimy quickly realized he'd gotten a little too excited. If he pushed things too far, he could accidentally pull away the consciousness controlling his split bodies. He started reviewing his parasitic domination skill. At level 7, it allowed him to control 7 puppets at once. The problem was that operating the armor already used up 5 consciousness bodies. That only left room for 2 additional parasitic puppets while staying in this armored state. Inside his mind, he looked through different possible combinations. Frogs, birds, lizards, crabs. Mixing different creatures together could completely change his fighting style depending on the situation. Slimy figured it would take time to properly test all the combinations and see how they worked in actual combat. He wanted to find the most efficient setups possible so he could react quickly no matter what happened later. Deciding that testing things directly was the fastest way forward, he got started immediately. Golden ripples spread across the ground as he activated his summoning ability. A small yellow bird puppet appeared first, followed by a blue multi-eyed lizard puppet. The bird settled onto his shoulder while the lizard crawled around near his feet. Looking at them beside the armor, Slimy admitted they seemed incredibly weak in comparison. Meanwhile, over at the lake, the giant 3-headed swamp snake finally lay collapsed on the ground, covered in blood and no longer moving. Lena Short celebrated immediately, convinced the group had finally defeated it. Nearby, the red-haired B-rank adventurer Jim Cook stayed cautious, warning everyone not to relax yet while preparing to properly finish the monster off. Just as one of the snake's eyes twitched and its head shifted slightly, a huge hand suddenly grabbed its jaw before anyone else could react. A muscular man wearing sunglasses casually stepped out from the snake's mouth and remarked that there was no need to attack anymore since the creature was already completely dead. The man was Bacchus, an A-rank adventurer from the Holy Anthem Guild. A strange white pulsating growth could be seen in the poisoned hand. Then, all of a sudden, the injured limb started healing. Jim Cook looked completely stunned as he admitted he honestly thought Bacchus had already been eaten and killed. Towering over the group, Bacchus scolded them harshly, saying people from smaller guilds were way too confident for their own good. He pointed out that they clearly had no real experience dealing with a three-headed swamp snake, yet still acted like they could give orders without consequences. A heavy pressure spread from him as he warned that everyone there could have died because of that arrogance. Jim lowered his head and apologized for the mistake. Bacchus still looked strict, but after a moment, he pulled out several potions and handed them over, telling Jim to use them to recover everyone's condition. Before leaving, Bacchus gave one more warning. If they ran into high-level monsters again, they shouldn't try fighting head-on. In his view, surviving and escaping came first. He added that he wanted everyone to make it back safely to the royal capital together. Jim and Lena watched him walk away. Jim commented that even though Uncle Bacchus looked terrifying, he was actually pretty kind underneath it all. Lena agreed, mentioning that staying alive really was the most important thing. Nearby, Xiaoxi Green looked amazed by the quality of the Holy Anthem Guild's potions. After drinking one, she felt magic power rushing through her whole body. Right away, she activated Flash Freeze, her staff glowing with bright, almost heavenly light. Meanwhile, Bacchus approached the enormous corpse of the swamp snake. Muttering to himself, he commented that the guild master really went overboard by sending him out for something this simple. Standing in front of the body, he activated a skill called Soul Collection. He raised his glowing cross necklace high into the air, and an enormous magic circle spread beneath the snake's corpse. Intense red beams burst upward from the seal, and the corpse of the three-headed swamp snake slowly disappeared into the magic circle. At the same time, Bacchus's expression turned much colder. He quietly wondered why they couldn't just use humans directly as sacrifice elsewhere. Slimy split bodies stood in formation, practicing martial arts in their new armored suits. They shouted in unison as they moved through their drills. A system message appeared, confirming that the martial arts talent had automatically adapted to the current setup. Slimy's armored hand gripped a heavy mace, and with a powerful swing, he smashed through nearby rocks and trees. Slimy was impressed by the result. He remarked that a humanoid body was incredibly convenient, noting that even a casual swing felt as powerful as a plasmatic cannon. He thought back to Gon, realizing that if the martial arts talent was this strong already, then Gon in the past must have been terrifying. After successfully adapting to the armor, Slimy started considering his next move. He wondered whether he should continue exploring unknown areas or head toward the royal capital through the portal. He worried about his current strength, knowing that if humans discovered him, he would probably be captured and experimented on. At the same time, he realized that if he didn't stop the church's plan soon, the world itself would be sacrificed, leaving him with nowhere to escape. While weighing his options, Slimy suddenly sensed movement through his mycelium network. Something had entered his territory. Meanwhile, an adventurer party had already made its way into Slimy's section of the forest. Jim looked around and commented that the area felt completely different from the last time he had been there. He specifically pointed out that he didn't remember the forest being covered in so much strange yellow slime. It wasn't just spread across the ground, either. The yellow substance coated the trees as well. The group wondered if it was some kind of monster secretion, but nobody knew for sure. Jim was more concerned with the fact that the slime kept sticking to his boot. Then the attack started. Large swamp leeches suddenly emerged and rushed toward the party. Lena reacted immediately, cutting them down with swift kill before they could get close. But there was no time to relax. A swarm of blade-legged centipedes appeared next and surrounded the group. One of the creatures jumped onto an adventurer and bit into his neck, causing panic to spread through the party as everyone tried to fight off the attackers. The group quickly found itself surrounded. As the situation grew more chaotic, Jim shouted for everyone to stay calm. He activated his magic sword art and unleashed Holy Flame, Pure Land. A massive wave of fire spread across the battlefield. The centipedes were burned away almost instantly, and by the time the flames faded, the entire area had been reduced to scorched, blackened ground. Despite the destruction, the adventurers emerged unharmed, while the immediate threat had been wiped out. Meanwhile, Slimy watched the entire battle through one of his hidden split bodies. Using the monitoring unit, he observed everything from a safe distance and was surprised to see humans this deep in the forest. Based on where they appeared, He figured they had probably arrived through the portal. After the centipedes were defeated, Jim activated Soul Collection and absorbed the energy from the fallen monsters into his sword. Looking at his team, Jim knew this was the first real mission for some of them. He gave a serious warning, reminding everyone that a single mistake in a place like this could cost them their lives. He explained that the souls from low-level monsters were poor quality, meaning they would eventually need to hunt stronger creatures. Those monsters would be much more dangerous, so everyone needed to stay alert. Then his speech was interrupted. A swamp frog suddenly dropped from above and kicked Jim directly in the face. The frog landed smoothly, struck a dramatic pose, and stared back at him. Jim immediately lost his patience and charged after it. Lena hurried after him, telling him to calm down, but Jim ignored her completely. He swung his sword and unleashed Fire Slash, yet the frog dodged every attack with ease. As the chase continued, the yellow mark on the frog's forehead started glowing. This time, Slimy had taken direct control of the puppet. He wanted to personally test the abilities of these adventurers. Using the frog, he launched a tongue fist straight into Jim's face. The hit only made Jim even angrier. He swore he was going to kill the frog, while Lena continued trying to stop him. Back with the rest of the group, Shi-Ai Green could only watch as her two strongest teammates disappeared deeper into the forest. With Jim and Lena distracted, a jungle demon spider puppet quietly moved into position behind the remaining adventurers. It immediately fired a barrage of sticky web projectiles. The webs exploded on impact and trapped several adventurers in place. Panic quickly spread through the group as they struggled to free themselves. Shi-Ai recognized the monster and knew its silk was vulnerable to ice magic. She quickly raised her staff and began preparing a spell. Before she could finish, a long tongue shot out and snatched the staff from her hands. The weapon was pulled away by the chameleon puppet hiding on a nearby tree. Within moments, Shi-Ai was wrapped in webbing just like the others. Meanwhile, Jim was still chasing the frog through the woods, determined to take it down. Suddenly, a heavy mace burst out from the ground and swung toward him. Jim barely managed to block the attack. He and Lena watched in surprise as the weapon was pulled back by a thick strand of yellow slime, retracting into a giant mound of yellow mold. At that moment, they realized the yellow slime wasn't just some strange substance covering the forest. It was a highly intelligent monster capable of using weapons. As the slime mass continued growing larger, Jim and Lena prepared themselves for a major fight. Then something unexpected happened. A figure in full armor dropped down from the trees. The armored warrior immediately smashed the giant slime mass apart, destroying the decoy in a single attack. Naturally, that warrior was Slimy. Playing the role of a mysterious ally, he pointed at the destroyed slime and warned them that the creature could devour magic to become stronger. According to him, physical attacks were the only effective way to deal with it. Lena watched the bubbling yellow mass and warned Jim that the slimes looked like they were getting angry. Jim stood his ground and assured her that there was nothing to worry about. He said he could still use Holy Flame 2 more times if necessary. The yellow slimes began surging forward aggressively. Then a voice suddenly ordered them to retreat. To everyone's surprise, the slimes immediately pulled back and receded. Jim stared at the scene in disbelief and wondered if they had really just retreated. A mysterious voice then addressed the group, asking if they could understand what it was saying. Confused, Jim asked what the speaker meant and questioned who they were. Watching their reactions, Slimy quickly realized that the humans could indeed understand him. Internally, he noted that he was apparently able to communicate with people from this world. Slimy remembered that the encyclopedia synchronized from Gon's system contained information on the languages of the world. As his body shifted, an opening formed within the slime. He explained that thanks to the flexibility of his body, he could imitate the structure of vocal cords and produce speech. Internally, he continued experimenting, noting that by slightly changing the shape of those simulated vocal cords, he could create different voices. In his imagination, 2 slimes stood behind microphones as he proudly listed the possibilities, ranging from mature women to authoritative leaders, little boys and little girls. Before he could continue, Lena interrupted him. Looking suspicious, she pointed out that the portal to the swamp forest had only recently opened and that their group was the first batch to enter. She asked which guild he belonged to. That question immediately put Slimy in a difficult spot. Internally, he panicked. The only guild names he really knew were Gon's 100-style guild and the Blue Hat Guild that had hunted Gon in the past. After a brief pause, he awkwardly claimed that he was from the 100-style guild and said he had been sent on a secret mission to eliminate the yellow slimes in the area. The moment Lena heard the name Gon, her attitude changed completely. She immediately activated Swift Kill and rushed at Slimy with her daggers. While attacking, she accused the Hun-style guild of betraying the royal capital. According to what the church taught, Anyone connected to that guild was considered a cultist who needed to be eliminated. Slimy easily avoided every strike. Lena kept attacking again and again, but none of her blows connected. No matter how fast she moved, Slimy slipped past her attacks without difficulty. Eventually, he got annoyed and decided he'd had enough. He threw a weapon at her, forcing her to dodge. That only made Lena more cautious. She couldn't understand it. The man was wearing heavy armor, yet he moved with incredible speed and flexibility. Even her strongest assassination techniques hadn't managed to leave a scratch. Then Jim rushed in to support her. He accused Gon of making a contract with a demon and claimed that everyone connected to Gon was the lowest kind of criminal. Slimy was genuinely confused and wondered what demon contract they were even talking about. As Jim brought his sword down with full force, Slimy casually blocked the attack with one hand. The strike only dealt minor damage. Slimy immediately pointed out that he had just helped them deal with the slime monsters. Instead of thanking him, they had tried to kill him the moment they met. He couldn't understand their logic at all. Jim stared in shock. His sword had been crafted by a mastersmith, yet Slimy had stopped the attack with a single hand. Before he could react, Slimy activated plasmatic cannon. The blast sent Jim flying backward and crashing into a tree. Slimy was pleased with the result. The armored body combined with martial arts talent felt incredibly powerful. He could even fire plasmatic cannon with one hand while barely putting in any effort. Seeing Jim get hurt made Lena furious. She activated Shadow Kill and rushed forward at incredible speed. Appearing right in front of Slimy, she drove both swords through the eye slits of his helmet while yelling that he would pay for hurting Jim. Just before she could continue, Jim shouted for her to stop. He told her to keep the enemy alive because they still needed information about the supposed cultists. Lena immediately backed off and awkwardly admitted that she might have accidentally killed him already. She explained that seeing Jim injured had made her lose control for a moment. Jim looked embarrassed and pointed out that she usually didn't react that strongly to him getting hurt. Lena quickly tried to deny it. Jim, now equally embarrassed, said he knew she still cared about him. He even brought up the time she rejected him and left the Silverleaf Guild, suggesting her master had probably forced her to do it. Lena reluctantly admitted that her master had taught her that a true assassin should abandon unnecessary emotions. That answer seemed to encourage Jim. He shyly shared a dream he had been keeping to himself. After completing a few more missions and saving enough money, he wanted to leave the royal capital behind, quit adventuring, and live a quiet life somewhere peaceful. Lena admitted that if she could stay with him forever, she would gladly choose that future. Meanwhile, reality looked very different. The swords Lena had thrust through the helmet hadn't hit Slimy's eyes at all. They had only pierced through his cheeks. So while the two adventurers were having an emotional conversation, Slimy was still sitting there listening to everything. The more he listened, the more annoyed he became. He couldn't believe they were having a romantic moment while assuming he was already dead. At the same time, he pieced together some important information. Gon's guild had apparently been branded as a demonic cult, and these adventurers seemed to fully believe the church's version of events. Finally, Slimy lost patience. He grabbed Lena and threw her away. Lena was horrified. She couldn't understand how someone could still be alive after taking those attacks through the helmet. Slimy told them that since peaceful conversation clearly wasn't an option, he would just tie them up first and ask questions afterward. Jim hurried over to check on Lena. She assured him she was fine but insisted that Slimy had to be using some kind of demonic power. Slimy immediately rejected that idea and told them they had been lied to by the church. Internally, he was also evaluating the situation. Based on their performance, ordinary human adventurers no longer posed much of a threat to him. Jim, however, refused to listen. He declared that this time he would finish the battle properly. Activating Holy Flame, he surrounded himself with brilliant holy energy and proclaimed that evil would be destroyed. Slimy sighed. He really hadn't wanted to kill them, but they kept forcing the situation in that direction. With that, he activated martial arts talent, Raider. Just as the battle was about to begin again, the scene shifted elsewhere in the swamp forest. Not far away, another group was busy hunting fish-type monsters and collecting their souls. After clearing out large numbers of weaker creatures, they continued deeper into the forest. One of the members suddenly sensed something unusual and informed Sister Faye that a powerful magical signature was coming from the left. Faye, a B-rank adventurer from the Blue Hat Guild, remained calm. She commented that after defeating so many weaker monsters, it seemed they had finally attracted the area boss. A moment later, the ground shook violently. Then a mud skipper burst up from beneath the earth. Standing nearby was Anita, Merlin's youngest disciple and a C-rank adventurer from the Blue Hat Guild. Without hesitation, Anita gathered mana and prepared to face the massive creature head-on as she immediately began casting wind magic. A sudden rush of air swept through the battlefield as Anita focused her mana. High-tier wind magic gathered around her, forming a massive vortex that spun violently at her side. Before she could release the spell, a mudskipper beast burst from the shadows behind her and raked its claws across the back of her neck. Anita cried out and collapsed into the mud as blood spilled from the wound. Seeing her teammate fall, Sister Feifei swung her weapon forward and shouted for their remaining ally to stay focused and fight back. She immediately activated intermediate lightning magic, and the spell Crimson Lightning erupted across the battlefield. Jagged bolts of red electricity crashed down repeatedly while the mudskipper beasts darted across the wet ground, leaping into the air to avoid the strike. One of the creatures screeched as the lightning scorched the mud around it. Sister Feifei kept her weapon raised and realized the fight was more difficult than expected. The enemy could sense mana and move quickly through the swampy terrain. Nearby, Luoluo stood inside a glowing magic circle and said she could not understand how two mudskipper leaders had appeared together when the tribe's leaders were known to avoid sharing territory. Feifei angrily dismissed the concern, saying it did not matter how many leaders there were because they were still low-level monsters. She ordered Luoluo to keep one occupied while she prepared a stronger spell. Red electricity surged around her hand as she channeled high-tier lightning magic into Scarlet Bolt. One mudskipper beast crossed its arms in front of its face, bracing for the impact. The crimson lightning exploded against it in a violent discharge. When the smoke cleared, the creature was still standing, electricity crackling across its body as it screamed. Feifei smirked and said that even if it had blocked the main blast, the lingering current would still paralyze it. Her confidence vanished when a huge wall of mud erupted between her and Luoluo, completely blocking her view. Feifei turned and furiously demanded whether Luoluo was joking, scolding her for failing to hold off a single mudskipper leader. Then her anger turned to shock as she looked down and realized something was wrong beneath her feet. A mudskipper beast exploded upward from the mud directly under her. Before Feifei could react, mudskipper beast dragged her into the depths of the mud. Luoluo ran forward in terror, reaching out while shouting Feifei's name as her teammate was dragged into the swamp. Only Feifei's hands and weapon remained above the surface for a moment before they vanished. At the same time, a massive whirlpool of mud began spinning across the swamp as the skill Triple Mire Vortex activated. Luoluo found herself trapped at the center, unable to escape as the ground pulled her downward. Around the edge of the vortex, the three mudskipper beasts gathered and screeched triumphantly at their trapped prey. Determined to survive, Luoluo activated Magic Shield, surrounding herself with a protective barrier as she struggled against the sinking mud. She quickly assessed the situation and concluded that the mudskipper leaders were fighting with coordinated teamwork and appeared to possess evolved intelligence. Realizing she would not last much longer, she decided to retreat and bring the information back to the guild for Guild Master Lusha. Keeping her shield active, she cast Lightsoar Wings. A pair of magical wings emerged from her back and lifted her into the air. Just as she attempted to escape, a mudskipper beast sprang from the mud, wrapped itself around her, and tore off her head with a single bite. As the battle faded from view, a massive tail splashed back into the swamp. Deep beneath the mud, a vertical shaft became visible. The passage was filled with human skeletons, animal skulls, and scattered bones, leading down into a subterranean cavern. At the bottom of the cavern, Sister Feifei lay face down on a mound of skeletal remains. Slowly regaining consciousness, she pushed herself up and looked around, wondering where she was. Then she looked upward and saw a colossal creature towering above. Luoluo hung unconscious from its enormous mouth. In front of the giant monster, the three smaller mudskipper beasts stood together, screeching excitedly across the bone-covered floor. A system panel appeared and identified the creature as the Mudskipper King, level 69. The Mudskipper King looked down at Feifei and asked whether she was the human responsible for killing many of his children. Fear spread through Feifei as she stared at the enormous monster. She realized it could speak and recalled records describing dangerous monsters that had awakened intelligence. She could not understand how such a creature had appeared within the swamp forest. Drool dripped from the Mudskipper King's mouth as he declared that he was starving and could never be satisfied. He ordered his followers to hunt more prey and bring it back to him. The three mudskipper beasts immediately obeyed. Screeching excitedly, they leaped across the piles of bones and rushed out of the cavern. The Mudskipper King then lowered himself closer to Feifei while holding the injured Luoluo in his mouth. He demanded to know whether she had seen a yellow monster. Feifei lay on the bone-covered ground and could only cry out for help. The giant monster lowered a massive hand toward her and asked whether she could not understand human language. Feifei desperately crawled backward while continuing to call for help. The Mudskipper King's massive hand slammed down with tremendous force, crushing everything beneath it as blood spread across the ground. Blood-stained drool dripped from his mouth as he muttered that the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He added that if a heavy rain had not saved him, things would have ended differently. His anger continued to build. Repeatedly muttering that he was furious, he unleashed a blinding burst of light from his eyes. Columns of golden energy shot upward through the mud and into the forest above. On the surface, Senior Bacchus noticed beams of light piercing the sky. Turning toward their source, he immediately sensed the power behind them and remarked that the aura of evolution was unusually strong and worth investigating. Before he could leave, a large bird monster wandered onto the path and let out a chirping call. Bacchus noted that he needed to deal with the two monsters in front of him first. Bacchus leaped forward and brought his boot down onto the green-headed bird monster's neck, driving it hard into the dirt. As the creature endured the attack, a crimson serpent suddenly emerged from its back. The snake immediately coiled around the bird monster's body. The serpent then lunged at the warrior and sank its fangs into his leg. Despite the venomous bite, he remained completely unfazed. With a swift spinning kick, Senior Bacchus sliced through the serpent and severed its head before landing firmly on his feet. Looking down at his leg, he noted that the venom appeared to have a petrifying effect. Before he could react further, one of the bird monsters activated pseudo-dragon breath. Gathering stone splash within its beak, it unleashed a torrent of molten stone and magma that crashed over Bacchus and engulfed him completely. As the magma hardened around him, Bacchus observed that the monsters in the area seemed far more troublesome than before. A massive column of hardened earth rose around him, completely sealing him inside a stone prison. Even while trapped, Bacchus calmly assessed the situation. He concluded that after the fall of the swamp forest's former ruler, the nine-headed dragon King Kidoyelua, its origin soul power had been evenly redistributed among the monsters of the region. Moments later, a powerful shockwave erupted from within the stone shell. The prison shattered apart. Senior Bacchus stepped out of the debris completely unharmed and fixed his gaze on the remaining enemies. The two bird monsters screeched in alarm and backed away. Looking down at them, Bacchus gathered his strength and remarked that it seemed he would need to get a little more serious.